Good morning. I'd like to call to order the September 8th Committee of the Whole meeting starting at 9:02. And at this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the council? Seeing none. Administration?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration would like to remove item 8.1, the Citizen Satisfaction Survey, and we would like to replace it under 8.1, the CRU utilization. We would also like to add two items under in camera, item 11.1, item pertaining to FOIP section 23(1)A, item 11.2, item pertaining to FOIP section 17(4)F. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to confirm as amended.
I would so move to approve the agenda, Your Worship, as amended.
Thank you. You all heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? We have no presentations today, and under delegations, we have Alice Booth and Florence Vandervelde from the Handybus Board. Mr. Legore, are you going to start off with introductions or lead us in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've had a number of discussions with the Handybus Association. Mel has prepared an MOU, which we have made a minor amendment to. I discussed that with Alice, the president of the Handybus Association, with it yesterday. That has been provided to council. We did not receive a response to all of Councillor Bauer's questions that have been submitted. We did provide you with the financial statements. And with that, I think we're prepared to answer any questions that council has, either ourselves administratively or members of the Handybus Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legore, and welcome Alice and Florence. I guess I'll just lead off with one question arising from last night. And there was a bit of confusion as far as the annual funding from the town and how the amount was arrived at. Right now, the MOU shows annual funding of $175,000 per year. But if we look at your idea of per capita funding, that would come out to about $140,000 a year. And so my question is, I guess how the $175,000 was arrived at for this new MOU, and does that amount of $175,000, will that help or put the Handybus Association into a surplus situation? So I'll turn to the presenters.
Good morning, everyone. The document that we were talking about last night was when we had a meeting with the towns. They wanted something presented to show them how could we work together as everyone in the municipality to get stable funding for the Handybus. So what I was trying to do was get the county and those towns to look at stabilized funding through their per capita, because they seem to sit there. I've been working on this for 14 years, I got to tell you, and it seems like it's worse than pulling your wisdom teeth to get someone to sit and how do we work as a team? So what you're doing is taking a portion of this so-called team and asking me to give you a good answer. I can't do it. What I'm trying to do is get everyone, town of Strathmore, Wheeling County, the three communities, Rockyford, Standard, Hazard, to get together, look at stabilized funding for this operation. Last night was a dismal failure, in my view. I got asked the same questions that I've been answering over the last 15 years, 14 years. And I think Florence can verify that because she's been on this board that long too. So what we were trying to do was do that. if I didn't put your funding in there, because what I was trying to do was get the town and the county to look at and say, what is it it's going to take if all of us join forces? Of course, your funding would naturally go down if everyone was on the same page. We don't have everyone on the same page. So what you have in front of you, and you may think I'm a little blunt, and I guess I am because I've worked hard on this, our whole board has. And it's coming down to the funding the town has given previously is what we're looking at. And we have an MOU in front of you that we had a lawyer do that we felt was fair and equitable. And the association has to move forward on its own or lose all the grants, as we explained to you guys before. So we're in a quandary. We've given you our MOU and we're prepared to sign that. If there's some minor changes, fine. I think we're open to look at that. But at this point, I think we've really given you all the information we can for you to make a decision on the MOU. You either support us or you don't. I think that's about where this organization is at this point.
Well, it just as a follow-up, I understand that, we want to make this work and you want to have solidified funding, but I'm still looking for clarity that it's per capita for everyone, but Strathmore pays more, and that's because of the ridership. Is that where that comes from? I think the public wants to know some of this. It's not just for us.
I didn't include you. All of what we did is we only showed what it would cost the counties. If the town of Strathmore didn't support us at all, with the same ridership and the same expenses, this is what we would require. That was what this stabilized funding was. So Strathmore wasn't in the equation.
Yeah, I understand that, but I see the MOU in front of me. And I guess the second part of my question was, if we pay at 175,000 per year or 140,000 per year if it was per capita, is that going to give the handy bus a surplus at the end of 2021 or 20?
Not a surplus.
No?
Not a surplus. It'll just cover costs.
Okay. I'll turn to Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think what we're confused and we're trying to get our heads wrapped around is that the costs that you're saying you have on a yearly basis. So we asked last night again, the full costs you're saying to run the handy bus is $222,648.70. But us paying $175,000 doesn't make any sense if that's all of your costs. I absolutely love the fact that you're talking about stable funding. I think that's absolutely great, but it has to be fair and equal to all parties. So if we go with your $10 per capita, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that either. But we want to make sure that we're all being treated fair on your team and that we're treating the people that are riding the handy bus fair. So if your expenses only come to $222,648.70 for the year, and we're giving you, let's even say that we do the per capita between all of them. So Strathmore, Wheatland, Rocky Ford, Standard, Hazard. If we pay per capita based on your $222,000 that you require, that's $10 per capita. That means you don't need your user fees. That means that people could ride the bus for free because your expenses are being paid. And any donations that you get or any in-kind grants, anything, can go to your reserves. Therefore, our per capita spending would actually cover all of your expenses, and anything you brought in, fundraising, donations, or any other method, would then go to your reserves. Does that make sense?
And I think I commented on that to the mayor last night. Of course, your per capita would go down if everyone took part. I think it was quite obvious last night. The county isn't prepared to change what they're doing, and neither is the rest of the towns. So it's a moot point, in my opinion. You would be right if everybody took part, but we haven't got everybody taking part.
But I don't think that they didn't say no. They just said that the way it was presented wasn't what they were expecting, and that they needed to have more of a look at it to see and come up with a more sustainable model. So they weren't saying no. The other thing that you have to remember is any of the nonprofits that we give money to, even based on an MOU, we give you money, we actually need a seat at the table. And so did all of those towns and municipalities, the county as well as all the towns. If they give money, they want a seat at the table. That's how we do things. That has to be part of all of this as well. If we're giving that kind of money, we need at least 1 or 2 seats at your table. And that's not anywhere in any of this either. So I understand that you're trying to get stable funding. I just don't think you're quite there yet.
Well, I guess that's a decision you'll have to make today. We have always had feet under the table from every one of them. The towns, Rockford, Hazard, and Standard, decided they couldn't afford to pay for people to come, so they didn't support. Also, if we go back to the as we're an association, we cannot be run by government officials, or we lose our grants.
We're not asking to run. We're just asking for a seat at the table. That's how we operate all of our other committees that we also fund.
We have put here, you have a seat at the table at our monthly meeting. We haven't denied that, and neither we denied the county. They still have a seat. Whether their councillors come or not, that's up to them, not up to me.
So Alice, just to clarify, you're saying one member of council would be a non-voting member of the board then?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Okay. And the reason you're welcome there, and you will get the same information you've been always getting. Mr. Montgomery was 4 years as the president on this board. He had financials, he had minutes, he had everything. Everything's been given to you, and I was on the board 10 years before him, and everyone got financials and minutes of the meeting every month. So it's not changing. That's still the same thing, except we cannot have government bodies running the association, or we won't have an association. We'll be out. And they're clamping down on everybody. We've already been warned, and Jason is very much aware of it. He's been warning this board repeatedly for the last 4 years.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand as far as we would be able to be at the table as a non-voting member. Do you have any other questions or comment, Councillor Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, Your Worship, I don't really understand that. We are voting members of Wheatland Housing. It's a nonprofit.
I think
It doesn't matter. It's still a nonprofit.
I can clarify if you'd like, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you.
AGLC, which is kind of in charge of a bunch of the some of the grants that the Handy Bus is able to access, they have a stipulation that not more than 25% of a charitable board can be made up of appointed members. So that means that, if there was 8 members, you couldn't say, like, you're allowed to say, there's one reserve spot for the town of Strathmore, there's one reserve spot for the Wheatland County, but you couldn't say, there's also one reserve spot for the Lions, because that would cross that 25% threshold. How we got around that was by making people members at large, essentially. So it has nothing to do with kind of being run by the government, just so much as they just have a rule about how many members can be appointed versus just members at large. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so, sorry, Councillor Montgomery, but that doesn't mean that they can't vote.
No, there's certainly nothing that says that representatives of a certain group can't vote. That wasn't one of the rules.
So as long as we stay in that 25% membership, we essentially could be a voting member, is what you're saying?
Well, as I said, and this is, I believe, what happened with me. I was made a member at large rather than a representative of the town of Strathmore. But they basically, they could have 10 different groups represented, but they just have to make each representative a member at large rather than an appointed reserve spot essentially on the board. You can't reserve more than 25% of the spots. It really has nothing to do with your ability to vote or not. There's no prohibition on being able to vote or being a voting member based on how you got on the board.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, Alice and Florence, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for your many years of hard work on this. I think that coming in as a councillor and looking at the entire budget of the town of Strathmore, one thing that I've realized is that if we give $125,000 to any group, that's 1% of our residential taxes. And so we're looking at right now $175,000 to one group for ridership that we don't know where the numbers come from. And when I'm saying that, I'm saying that the details that we've asked for repeatedly, because it's been more than one meeting, we're not getting. And so I would like to continue this discussion. I'm not ready to give up, because I really believe that the handy bus is an essential service for seniors. I don't know if it's something that the people of Strathmore will agree we need to be putting in 10 times the amount of the county of Wheatland. And I think that if they found that out, they would be quite upset at us as officials. And so I can't in good conscience approve this MOU today as it stands. However, if you were to, and I see that you have paid an accountant $10,000 to do your audited financial statements. He also helps, I heard you last night at the Wheatland Regional Partnership say that you work very closely with your accountant. I would implore you to just go through your statistics, bring us back ridership, where it's coming from, whether or not people, last night I heard something that I'd never heard before. Alice, I heard that people were actually getting driven to Strathmore and then taking a handy bus from Strathmore into their appointments in Calgary because it was cheaper for them. They didn't have to pay from Hazard, and they were being counted as Strathmore residents. So I really need to know where your numbers are coming from. Are they Strathmore people? Are they coming from the Lodge? Are they coming from Sagewood? Where's your ridership? And so if I'm to look at the per capita funding, and I know that we have 25% of our population as seniors, I have to be able to justify that. And so I also think that, unfortunately, the way that Councillor Montgomery was dismissed from your board, I don't know if it followed your bylaws. And the fact that you're not willing to give him a vote at the table now worries me, because a vote at the table means that we have input. And for $175,000, I believe we should have input. If it's less than that, I don't have a problem with it all being the same. And from what Councillor Montgomery has just explained, the member at large may fill that gap. It might allow Wheatland County and ourselves to be at the table and have a little bit of a say, and also be able to fulfill your nonprofit status. You have a very healthy budget. You have a very healthy reserve, pardon me, let me clarify. If you were to dip into that reserve and provide the town of Strathmore, even for 1 year, free ridership, get your ducks in a row, be able to say to the public, we are rebranding the Handy Bus. We are going to try and increase our ridership and our level of service to the people of Strathmore and Wheatland County. Dip into those reserves so that you get, in my mind, more of a nonprofit status for your numbers that you're bringing to us. And then you'll still be eligible for grants, you'll still be eligible for additional money, because typically that money is accessible for things like vehicles and not operations, not wages, that kind of thing. So I would really like to see some more innovative thinking instead of just doing the things the same way that you've done for a lot of years. Just maybe trying and thinking outside the box. And so I would like to suggest that perhaps there are people within our community that we can put you in touch with. Specifically, I'm thinking Community Futures Wild Rose and Wendy Gerbrand. I think that if you spoke with her, she's very, very familiar with nonprofit groups, she's familiar with governance, she's familiar with budgets, she's familiar with a lot of different things, and I think you could also pick her brain to find out some alternatives in here. And I'm just gonna kind of stop there because I've pretty much said everything. But I do really want this conversation to continue. I can hear you're frustrated and you kind of think that if today we don't make a decision, that that's the end. And I really don't want it to be that way. I want us to keep working together to try and find a solution that is equitable for all. Thank you.
Alice, did you want to respond or answer any?
Yes, I would. And thank you for what you said. Ever since I got on the board in 2008, the town has been operating this organization. And that was when we've signed an MOU. Because before that, it was volunteer drivers weren't paid. Florence was on the board. I'll let her talk about it a little bit too. And so the way the Handy Bus was working was from yourselves, Town of Strathmore. We were just a board that produced the money. So when you talk about change of what we need to do, that's exactly what we're talking about, where the Handy Bus takes it back and is running it then without you as a council and an organization operating it. Because that was what we found, is we were being limited to what we could do. We were being told to, you're just a board to raise funds. You just go out and get donations, and we know how to run this better. So that's why we're where we are today, okay? Now, you talked about statistics. We have given statistics, and Florence and I were the ones that started this way back in 08, 09, 010. We made sure that the town knew everyone riding, where they were from, if there were wheelchairs, walkers, canes, whatever. Because before that, we didn't have anything. And we needed to be more specific of who was riding, because we are a specified operations, right? It's seniors, disabled, whatever. And we were exclusive of all of that. But what we found, we were being, the board, the Handybus board was really not having a say of how the town decided to operate this. And so that's why we're here today. Now, I can give you Florence and she can tell you the rides. I believe I left you a sheet when we were in front of you telling you the clients, where they were from, the trips they were on, whether they were medical, whether they were Wheatland County, Rockyford, able-bodied, or what. I don't know if you got that. I left it with your staff, CAO. So I'd already presented you with that, as well as the financial for, I believe it was June at that time. So I was a little perplexed to what other information you needed, because the town had all of our records. They have all our finances right from 2020 back to at least 2008. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Florence, and she can give you exactly what you asked for, Counselor, the medical trips and everything else. Florence, do you want to take that over, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So as of the end of June, we have 157 clients from Strathmore riding, and 7 from the county.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Councillor Montgomery, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to say, so I've asked for this information a couple of times now through email directly to the association president, and those requests went unheeded. This is not the time and place to be reading numbers and then trying to make a decision based on that. I asked for those numbers, over a month ago now. And in order to process these properly, we need to be given them in writing, like actually, like an actual report as is normally given to the board. And that's why I did ask for it in that format. This isn't the place to be giving us numbers. They're not going to have any, they're not going to do us any good at this point. We need to be able to process them and reflect on them. So again, I will ask you again to please send the information that I requested to the council so that we can properly look at this and make a decision based on the numbers in front of us. I'm sorry, there's not much point in discussing numbers being kind of read out to us at this time. Thank you.
I think what Alice was trying to say is that numbers were sent to us and that
Yes.
we did receive some information.
Yes.
Mr. Lagore, did you, is that right? Did you withhold those?
I wonder if you could reword that question as far as the tone of it, Councillor Montgomery. It feels a bit negative as far as did he withhold.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Lagore, did you get the numbers and we did not get them passed along to us?
We got a package.
You have to turn off your mics.
To you, Mr. Mayor. There was numbers that were distributed earlier to council. We did not get a response to the last email that Councillor Bauer forwarded, and I could give you the date on that if you give me a minute. We did not get a response to the August 24th email of Councillor Bauer.
Okay, thank you. Just looking around council, are you comfortable with Florence continuing with the numbers? Councillor Sobel, are you comfortable with that? Okay.
May I speak one moment?
Yes.
When we were in council, Mr. Mayor, the last time in July, I believe, was it the 21st of July we were there? We turned over financial statements and I presented them, and you were sitting there seeing me, and I went to give them to Mr. Galore. That it was given to your staff, And that was the same document we're talking about today with the financials. And that went there. Now, I gave it to your staff that was sitting there at your table. I don't know their name, but Florence and I made sure that you had those for that meeting. So it was given to you. And Doug gave the audited statement to the councillors.
Thank you, Alice. Florence, I think council is comfortable with you continuing on. You said 7 clients from the county by the end of June?
By the end of June, yes. Yes.
Okay, and are villages considered in the numbers of 7?
Yes.
And I guess that brings me
Now
back.
that's the number of registered clients. The total of trips from the town of Strathmore up to the end of June was 716 trips. Now that is round trips. The number of just a minute. Number of out of town was 24. So you can see the number of clients from Strathmore considerably higher than that of the town or of the county.
Okay, if I could just ask a clarifying question. Out of those total 716 trips, is there a situation where residents from outlying areas are coming to Strathmore, going to a city appointment and getting written up as a Strathmore trip?
I do not believe at this time there has been.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Florence.
In the past couple of years, we've probably had maybe 3 clients from the county drive into Strathmore to catch the handy bus over time. Okay. But it's normally one client that has to go in for several trips. So they will drive to Strathmore and then catch the bus from Strathmore.
Okay, thank you. Do you have more information right now that you're presenting, or are you finished your report?
Yes, one thing I want to let everybody know, when we left the town, we had a client list for all our clients, and we were denied that client list because of under FOIP. But FOIP is not what we were under. We wanted the client list only. We were unable to get that. And so we had to start all over again to produce a client list. So now we have Strathmore clients. I believe Florence just gave you the figure. And that again, I know the counselor said we need to do things differently. I agree with her. And when we left the town, we had a number of things that happened because when first day we started up on February 1st, we had no fuel. We had our fuel card had run out. So we went back to the town to request our fuel cards because apparently 2 new ones were sent, but we never had them. So we couldn't get a hold of the person that was the manager that had these cards. So for the first 6 weeks to 7 weeks, we had to use a private card to even fuel our machines, our buses, our vans. And we were running about 4 a day. So I've got to tell you, yes, I agree with her. We have to do things differently. And what we're here for, and I think all of us have to always remind ourselves, it's about our seniors. And to me, they're very important. And I can tell you, looking around your office, there's quite a number of you who are in the senior program, and some of you are coming up. And that's, I think, the greater good we have to look at. I don't know how to fix this. I've worked hard to try. To always throw it back on the handy bus to say, you come up with the solution when we have so many people that are involved here. Again, I think we forget about the greater good. And it's easy to do. And yes, we're all under restraints. Money isn't growing on trees, as the old saying goes. We are all accountable for it. We haven't got an issue with a person being appointed to come to our meeting. We've never been opposed to that. We're opposed to being stuck in a corner. That's what I'm hearing from the board. I'm passing that on to you in a nice way. I believe we are at a turning point. And if everyone in Wheatland County and Strathmore and small villages really put their heads together, I think we could have a phenomenal organization. But always throwing everything back on the handy bus to say, you're the problem, you fix our problem, you tell us what to do. It's not working. It's not working. We need to sit down at a table, and everybody that's sitting at that table needs to wrap their head around. This is important to everyone, to our clients. And if we are not going to go in with this kind of a thought, then we're doomed. We really are. And this is, I'm getting the same from you as I've got from the rest. Well, we don't want to pay more than we have to, which I understand totally. But everyone takes that attitude. We're still in the same boat. Our clients are sitting out there sick. They're not going to appointments. We've priced ourselves out of the market for the rural at $140 a trip. They're on a fixed income, $1,300 to $1,700 a month. We have people in their 70s working, living in the town of Strathmore because they can't afford to live on their pensions.
Alice, if I could just interject. I just want to assure you that this council takes the Handy Bus Association very seriously. We really care about the seniors in our community as well as the villages in the county of Wheatland. We're just trying to come up with a figure that's realistic. We want to make sure that it's a realistic one, and it looks obviously like Strathmore is the predominant user of the Handy Bus.
Yes.
So I guess we're just trying to look at a situation where is the funding that everyone's providing, is that giving you money each year to add to reserves, or is it just almost as a wash? The money coming in is equal to the money going out.
Yeah, and you know what? If you look at the finances that we have been dealing with, we have really cut back on and trying to save money. So you're right. We could relook at things. We were paying $300,000 in salaries. As you've seen, we have cut our salaries to 121 roughly. This is all rough because we've only got 5-6 months of the year through. We don't know for sure, but that's as close as we can estimate it at this time. We are going to have a part-time dispatcher, and so that's going to put our costs up. We are bare bonesing things at this point in time. So we're trying to give you an idea where we're at. yes, you're right. We were getting 175,000 from you before. That was when our salaries were $300,000, right? So there is some work we can do.
Okay, thank you. That sounds promising. I'll turn now to Councillor Peterson and then Deputy Mayor Cox.
And then Councillor Sobel.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate what you've brought to us today. I just want to start out by saying that my goal is to support the Handy Bus to continue providing a quality, sustainable service, affordable service to the persons, to seniors in Strathmore and to persons with disability. I've sat at this table since 2013, and for the first 4 years I sat at this table, Councillor Blockland reported on a monthly basis on the budget of the Handy Bus, what they carried in reserves, what the cost to run the program was, and what the ridership was. From that information over those 4 years, I was able to glean one thing from that. That was that 85 to 90% of the ridership during that time was from Strathmore. And that this is essentially a Strathmore program, that the Handy Bus is a program that delivers services primarily to the seniors and persons with disabilities in our community, and that the work of the Handy Bus Board actually hugely subsidizes the care of the people in this community. It's really clear that the usership in the county is not affordable, and I don't know what solution that they'll come up with. When listening to you last night, I was thinking how useful it might be that if the county had a separate program system, that one of the things that they might consider is a shuttle system to Strathmore that would operate in conjunction with the Handy Bus, and that might serve your rural communities much better than is currently happening. I understand too that this is now a newly minted organization, and that the transition, like most transitions, has not been smooth, and that there's lots of work to do going forward. The $175,000 that Strathmore has put into this since 2009 would seem to me to be an incredibly reasonable amount of money when I think about the money that the Handy Bus has raised through highlighting the service you bring. And so whether it's a van from the Van Vertigen family that's donated, or from other persons, and the significant amount of donations that are brought to bear, it is the Strathmore community that has been the beneficiary of all of this. And I'm very, very grateful to that. So my hope is that we have an MOU sitting in front of us, and that we would approve this to go forward. One of the things that very much concerned me in looking at the 2018 to the current time, and relevant to a comment that you made last night that I think has veracity, and that is that without the continued support of the town, that this organization cannot remain fluid for more than 3 years. One of the things that I think is missing in that process for councillors and for the public is that operating off reserves is not a viable option going forward, that you cannot go to banks and borrow money, that you don't have the same capacity that municipalities do to raise money, and that you need to keep significant reserves in order to replace vehicles. And I know that the vehicles that you have, because they're handicapped accessible, are a significant cost. And you run, I think you run 5 vehicles, sometimes 6, up to 6, but I think you run 5. And so you need to have that money in reserve in order to keep your liquidity. And so I think that when I look at how you are rolling things out into the future, I feel a hopefulness. In terms of having a vote at the table, I'm much less concerned with that. I think that the power of this council and our relationship to our taxpayers, to our ratepayers, comes directly to this table. we have the right to decide how much we're going to spend. And that is the critical factor. The second critical factor is having someone at the table to report to this council on a monthly basis and to be able to bring our concerns to that. So I think that as long as we have the vote that controls the amount of money we give, we have what is necessary to represent our taxpayers rationally and reasonably. I just want to, I would just like, if I'm allowed through administration, Mel Teedy, our Director of Finance, has done due diligence for the handy bus for a long time. And I don't know if it's allowable, Your Worship, through administration, if Mr. Teedy would just comment on the necessity of the reserve for the health of the handy bus going forward, if that is okay, Your Worship.
I think that would be a good thing to hear from Mr. Teedy.
Thank you.
And then after Mr. Teedy, I'm going to go to Councillor Sobel and then back to Deputy Mayor Cox.
Good morning, Your Mayor, or Your Worship and Council. The handy bus MOU proposed by administration addresses the current situation of where the town and association is at this current time. The differences between what the association has put forward relates to definition, wording, and intent compared to what town administration put forward. Part of the differences relates to the handling of the bus barn. The bus barn was built on town land and was funded as follows: provincial grant of $106,000 and $37,720 from each of the town and county. The request from the association is to be paid for the present appraised value of the bus barn building within 30 days following the sale of the land and buildings where the bus barn currently is. Administration is recommending that the town obtain an independent appraisal to determine the current value. Administration further recommends that the 2020 account receivable be offset from the 2021 grant to the association. The recovery reflects the expenses in excess of the grant and revenue received by the town of the association for the 2020 year. The analysis of this amount has been shared with the association board each month as part of the monthly financial reporting. As far as other differences between the proposed MOU from the president and secretary of the association compared to the version recommended by administration is outlined in the report and relates to complying with relevant legislation, providing statistical information on the number of trips provided to residents of the town and county, along with providing annual audited financial statements and mid-year financial reporting to the town. So those are the differences between the MOU that we have in front of you and what was supplied by Florence and Alice at the last meeting. Now, with respect to history, over the 2009 time period to the end of last year, I prepared personally the financial information on a monthly basis for each of the meetings that was held during that time period. Typically, there were 10 or 11 meetings in any one year. The reserves grew over a period of time. They just didn't happen all at once. So for each of those years, the association was fortunate where it was able to combine the contribution from the town at $175,000 along with donations, participation from the county, bringing it all together and having normally a surplus each of those years, with the exception of the last year or two, 2019 and 2020, there were certainly deficits as a result of the escalating, primarily labor costs that the association experienced. In each of those meetings, ridership was always presented, the statistical report was presented by administration. Administration kept track of the statistics and presented it to the board in each of those meetings. And yes, the majority of ridership came from the town, as Councillor Peterson has pointed out. 90%, maybe over 90%, maybe 88%, but primarily in that 90% number came from ridership from the town. And the contribution from the town approximated that ridership. There's no question that the town was the primary financial backer of the association. The board, as Alice pointed out, certainly participated in bringing in the grants from casino or grants from other community organizations where community groups made an annual, biannual, semi-annual, whatever, financial support from different small community groups throughout the whole region. It certainly was a cooperative venture, and I believe it supported the seniors in this community very adequately. Yes, there were complaints that we didn't do weekends, we didn't do different things, but for the core need of the community, the handy bus certainly was there. And it was primarily attributable to the efforts of the board. Certainly the town ran the program in terms of delivery of the service at a very high level. The question is, can the board deliver that same quality of service? As Councillor Peterson pointed out, yes, there were hiccups. Yes, when the transition happened, gas wasn't available. Those gas cards were town cards. The program that the board put forward was they would look after the operations. When push comes to shove, they still needed some assistance, and yeah, we tried to support them, and we certainly want to see the association successful. Both administration and the board put their hearts and soul into running this service. There's no desire on administration's part to see this fail. Administration wants to see this carry on. Is $175,000 equitable? I believe it is. From my experience and being on the board, the 175 has not changed over the years. We have kept that as a flat amount. The amount from the county has varied significantly. Some years it was very little, other years it was more. Some years the donations were higher, some years they were lesser. But at the end of 2020, the reserves still were in excess of $400,000, which reflects an extreme amount of effort on the board. I'm willing to answer questions if council has some other questions concerning this. Thank you.
I just have a comment, and then I'll go to Councillor Sobel. If the total expenses are like Deputy Mayor Cox was quoting 222,648.70. If that's the expenses, and you're saying that ridership for Strathmore is 88 to 90%, it looks like we're doing well at 175. It could actually be more.
Absolutely.
So now I understand if the ridership is almost entirely Strathmore, it makes sense that we pay the lion's share of the expense of the fees for it. So I appreciate that information again, Mr. Teedy.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Sobel, and then we'll go to Deputy Mayor Cox, and then Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, thank you to Florence and Alice for your years of volunteering in what is clearly a very valuable program and much needed. So thank you for that. I'd like to just start off by reading part of a report that was of the most recent report from administration in regards to this program, and it's under strategic analysis. And it says the proposed MOU provides a workable framework for the town and administration to meet the needs of the community relating to the provisions of a handy bus service, outsourcing the transportation needs of seniors, handicapped, and those with disabilities to the private sector, i.e. taxi cabs, may seem an inviting way to reduce the cost to deliver the service. But it would require, and this is the important part, it would require significant review to determine if that alternative service delivery structure would meet the needs of the community. So I raised that and I appreciate the comments from everyone. The sense I have is that we're in an incredible time of change at this juncture of with the handy bus. Handy buses changed their way of doing business, and good on you guys. There's also changes with the council, and I'm very encouraged with the fact that it sounds as if you've gotten the Whitland County's ear at any rate, and that further discussions hopefully are going to take place in regards to a more stable funding source. So all that is to say that I'd like to propose, and I'm not sure how this would work for you guys, but I'm not quite sure that I'm prepared to enter into a 4-year funding agreement. What I'd like to do is to give you guys some breathing room, some immediate financial stability, and run this MOU until the end of 2022, as is. Just reduce the amount of years, and then revisit this with a whole. And I think that by the end of 2022, it sounds to me like things are going to be a lot clearer and perhaps a lot more stable in regards. This gives you folks 18 months to deal with the county and get a real good reporting system in place. I just and hopefully members of this council will agree to provide some financing for an 18-month period. Your worship, at your convenience, I'd like to make that motion, but to reduce the funding time frame to 18 months. Thank you.
So for that, we'd have to rise and report for any kind of a motion. Okay. So we'll.
That's yes. We're not in committee yet, are we?
No.
No, that's right. Okay. We'll circle back to you, Councillor Sobel.
Thank you.
I'll go to.
Your worship, I'm sorry. I'm wondering if there was any response by the handy bus on that proposal. I'd love to hear their comment if I could.
Okay, we'll turn to Alice. Did you hear all of Councillor Sobel's concept?
Yes, and thanks for that. And I would like to thank Councillor Peterson too, because she's very averse on her comments and what has gone on and where we're at and what we've gone through. And so I thank both of you for those comments. I don't know how I feel right now. I'm wondering if, because this is such an important thing, what would your council say about looking at getting a number of the whole group, a smaller group together from your council, from the Wheatland County, and Councillor Peterson had made a comment about we need to get the council, Wheatland County, more involved and more supportive. And she was absolutely right. It's been my goal all the time I was a councillor. And I fought hard for what we got from there, I can tell you. So would we, move ahead in some manner that we can come to an agreement on and form a smaller group of councillors and board members and maybe outside people, whatever we feel, to tackle this problem going forward? Would the council feel they're not sitting on a board, but we could be an advisory board to work with this organization moving forward on how we could get everyone involved in supporting it, because it's not going to get less. We're going to be more and more seniors and more disabled and more needing medical services. And right now, the residents in Wheatland County can't afford to ride the bus or the van. So somehow we've got to be able to look at this in a broader sense. So I'm putting that to this council to come back to assist us in maybe forming a group from each one of the organizations to sit down and tackle this moving forward. Because right now, I don't see a move to that. I still think we're not all coming together to see the bigger picture. And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying what is obvious, I think, to everyone sitting here and to the board to the group we talked to last night.
Thank
So
you.
this would be an outside board that possibly could be formed, and we could strategically plan things moving forward about how this organization can keep doing the good work it's doing for everyone,
Thank
Your
you.
worship, could I respond?
Yeah.
Considering I asked the question.
Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So when I spoke about incredible change, Alice, and I mentioned this council, so in 41 days, we're going to see a completely different council, both here. There will be significant changes to this council and with Wheatland Council and possibly to the three villages as well. So that's why that was one of the reasons why I proposed the 18-month was to get us through this. I mean, I want to focus on that rather than your proposal, because I'm not comfortable voting for or appointing someone who may or may not be here. This is, I think, an issue that has to be brought back once councils are in place, and that was one of the reasons for the 18 months. Great idea, but I think that's got to go to the next council for both our municipality and for Wheatland as well. So great idea, but the 18 months, what it does is it gets that funding in place for that period of time. Plus, it gives you a diary date. I mean, you can't sit on your hands on this. You only have 18 months. and things have to be done. And so it would keep you on track to do some of the things that you're talking about. Thank you.
Councillor Sobel, are you wanting to put that motion forward?
Can I,
Since we're not in committee
can
of
I
the whole?
speak first, though?
Pardon me?
Can I speak first?
Once we have the motion, there can be discussion, if that's what
Yeah,
you
but I
mean.
would like to add to the motion.
And you can suggest an amendment to his motion? Is that what you mean? I'm not sure what you're...
Well, if you let me,
Okay, I have Councillor Montgomery next, and then Deputy Mayor Cox. So Councillor Montgomery, and then we can circle back again to Councillor Sobel if that works.
Thank you very much. So I guess I'll just start off by, I'll echo what Ms. Booth said, and that is that I was on the Handy Bus Board for about 4 years. I served as president for a couple of those years and vice president as well. I'm very, very familiar with the association, with how it operates, with the history of it, with all the statistics, the users. I'm familiar with some of the issues that people have. And so I'm coming at this from the perspective of I have the background to know what I'm talking about. And I'll say this as well, the Handy Bus Association is not the people, it's not the seniors of Strathmore. There's and I know that sounds maybe ridiculous, but we shouldn't conflate the two. Our reluctance to jump into an MOU or a funding agreement where we have no say, and I don't mean the vote. I'm not really concerned about having one vote on the board. It's easily outvoted, and when you're the person supplying, all the money, and everybody else, gets to vote on how to spend your money, it's it matters little. But Councillor Peterson is right about one thing, and that is that we have one lever. Council has one lever to affect how the association and affect the value that our taxpayers get. And that is by putting strings or parameters around the money that we give. And so I think that it's, and that's why I've been reluctant to jump into a funding agreement where it says literally that the association will have sole discretion on how the services run, and they will determine to their sole discretion what constitutes an effective service. Councillor Peterson went to the trouble of even collecting feedback from one of the people that runs the lodge, and one of the things that they identified was that it was tough to get rides for their more able-bodied residents at some times, and I responded back when she shared that. I responded back and said, yes, this is exactly the type of feedback that we need to be getting. And this is exactly, excuse me, this is exactly the type of the things that we need to be communicating and carrying to our discussion with the Handy Bus Association. It's totally silly to just say, yes, here's $175,000. We don't have any say. We don't care what you do with it. Just tell us that you're running a service. We need to be representing our residents and ensuring that our residents are getting the service that they need, and that our residents are getting the value for their tax dollars. If you look at the number of trips that the association is expecting to do this year, and this includes trips to Calgary, obviously, but there's I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the trips are in town. That means, and when you look at the breakdown of the cost per trip, if they're doing, I believe, when again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, unfortunately, even though I asked for them, but, we're looking at paying over $100. Okay, the town itself is looking at paying over $100 on average per trip. Okay, and that means somebody wants to go to the grocery store, that's a round trip. The association charges that resident $15, okay, which is what a taxi would charge. But then on top of that, we're paying $100 as well to the association. So that trip that would cost the taxi $15 to provide, we're actually paying $115 for that same trip on average. That's not good value for our money. That's not good value to the residents of Strathmore. And I actually do care about the people of Strathmore, and I care about the seniors. For me, it's not about the Handy Bus Association. The Handy Bus Association, notwithstanding the members of the board, who I believe work very hard. The members of the board work very hard. They're very dedicated. Florence, for instance, has been on the board since 1986. I worked very closely with Florence. I have the utmost respect in the world for her, and I know how hard she works and how much she cares about doing the right thing for the people of Strathmore and the residents of Wheatland County as well. I know that. I care as well, and I care about providing affordable transportation to the people of Strathmore. And when I understand and I know in my head that we can provide, we can provide many more rides and move many more seniors around for substantially less money, I have a hard time getting behind an MOU where we're plowing ourselves into just basically more of the same. So that's where I'm coming from as an issue. We need to have a hard look at what we are expecting the association or the service to provide. For instance, why would we expect them, or why would we expect to pay for able-bodied seniors to ride through the association? The association's strength is providing mobility accessible transportation. That is the area of the market that our current taxis are not able to provide. And there's a number of reasons why they're not able to provide that. Part of the reason is because that the Handy Bus Association is, using up or taking what little market there is for mobility accessible transportation. There's not a lot of people that need mobility accessible transportation that, they can't get into a taxi. And so for like a very small number of people, we're basically, it's just not an efficient way to do it. And I think that we need to sit down and have, an actual discussion about what we want, to see for the people of Strathmore, and to see what we want, our money to go towards. And we should as a council, it is our duty to ensure that we are spending the money as efficiently as possible and trying to get the most out of it. And as I said, when you realize that you can, you know what? Okay. So about $115. When you think about the fact that for $115, we could provide, what is that? 6, 7, 8, almost 8 fully paid for cab rides. Okay. Rather than one trip in the Handy Bus where the person has to pay $15, we could literally provide 8 free trips to those people. That's where there's an issue, and we need to get to the bottom of what that issue is. We need to, the Handy Bus itself needs to look at, whether they are operating in the most efficient way, and if there is any other better ways to operate. I was on the board, as I said, for, several years. I served as the president. I went to other communities and I met with other Handy Bus boards. I looked at other models. And that is how I know that there is more efficient and effective ways to deliver the Handy Bus service. Yeah. Yeah. And then like, the MOU itself, there's problems with the MOU itself that I guess we could get into if council actually wants to discuss the MOU. And there's a lot of layers to this, not the least of which is, anyways, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alice, did you have any comments, or Florence?
I just want to appreciate what Jason has been saying and whatnot. Out of those trips, the medical trips and whatnot, there was 205 that were in wheelchairs and used other equipment to get around. And there was only 179 so far this year that were able-bodied seniors. So the number of clients that needed the Handy Bus service was, well, the ones that didn't need it were about 3/4 of those that needed it. And yes, the taxi can provide that service, but when you get a senior with shopping bags and a cane or a walker and approaches a taxi, that they have to open the door and load their own groceries and deal with folding up a walker or whatever in order to get into a taxi. That's why the seniors are preferring the handy bus service.
Thank you.
And we provide that quality trip.
Sorry, I just have a follow-up for Councilor Montgomery, and then we'll go to Deputy Mayor Cox, and then maybe we can come to some sort of a resolution as to what we're going to do. Councilor Montgomery?
Thank you. And yeah, like what Florence is saying, I'm sure is accurate. I don't have the numbers in front of me. What happened during COVID was that, you know, as some people are aware, probably the town, as the operator, opted to not provide drivers to the association anymore due to the risk of you know, drivers becoming infected with COVID. And so for some time prior to that, like the association was doing quite a few more trips, and there was quite a few more able-bodied people using the service. After that, when the association or the service shut down, people were forced to go to taxis, and quite a few people have remained, you know, just using the taxis. If they're not basically, you know, if it's not necessary to use the handy bus, many people are opting to use taxis. You know, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week service. It's the same price as the handy bus. And you know, speaking just anecdotally, my neighbor across the street, he's quite mobility restricted. He opts to use taxis for whatever reason, and I've seen them, you know, carrying groceries into his house and other things like that. So I'm certainly not suggesting that, you know, we'd be looking at, you know, throwing people to the wolves or anything like that. But again, it comes down to, you know, ensuring that we are pulling the lever that we have to get the best value for the people that we have under us or working, you know, like that we're representing, and that yeah, and everybody needs to evolve and adapt, and I believe that that's why we're here, that's why we're making an agreement at all. If this was just something that should happen, then, you know, it would have happened already. But we need to be doing our proper care here and making sure this is the best deal possible. Thank you.
Alice?
I want to make a comment about Wheatland Lodge. When we were having issues with the Wheatland Lodge, it was under the care and control of the town, so as well as the dispatcher. So there was some issues, and some of those issues used to come to our board, and when Hetty was involved, we had an excellent relationship with working with her and Mel. And the board could discuss those issues and bring it forward at the meeting, and it went back and it was looked after. And the last 4 or 5 years, that changed. And we didn't have Hetty, and the board didn't have any say. So when Mr. Montgomery said we should have done something different back then, he has to say that too, who was operating it. We were not. And even though the salaries were going up and stuff like that, we talked about it at the meetings. We were very concerned, but we were told they're town employees and we have no say. So, you know, to say what should have happened then, it was in a different realm. The town was administering this. The town was making these decisions, not the handy bus board. So you can't put that back on us and say we should have done something different. You're right. The lodge wasn't happy. There was a lot of our residents not happy with what was going on. No dispatcher, having to call in, leave a number, never get phone back. All those things, you know, one little simple mistake can do so much damage. And we have to recover from that. And that is what this board is working on. We're going out, we're doing surveys, trying to find out what our clients need, where the niche is that this organization should be in moving forward. So we're not sitting on our laurels. We are changing and doing, getting out and talking to our clients, surveying them, find out what it is we're lacking, where we can improve, what the service level of service they would like. And that is the first time it's ever been done since I started. And so I think that's a very positive move for the board to be making. And do we have all the answers? No, we don't. We've only been doing this since February. We have a lot of paperwork, bookwork, bylaws, policies, you name it, all to do in the change of what's going on. But moving forward, that is something we are working on. We're working on our membership. We're working on our clients. We're doing surveys. We're trying to see what the real need is. The taxis is not the answer. I'm able-bodied, and trust me, I cannot get on my hands and knees and climb into and out of some of these taxis we've got. They're very small, and when you may be able-bodied, but we're not as agile as we used to be. And so that is what some of our clients are saying. It's okay to try and push them in, but they're very reluctant because they're having difficulty getting in and out of those smaller taxi cabs. And I know there was a new way of doing business, and Jason was all for it. The rest of the board was not. About taking some of the money from the town, giving it to us to subsidize the taxis. We can't get into that. That is not our mandate. And if the town wants to subsidize the taxi, the town has to do that directly, not through the handy bus. And if it's a transportation problem, then that again goes back to the town that they need to look at their own transportation. We've talked about this in the handy bus board since I got on.
Thank you, Alice.
Handy bus versus transportation. So, you know, we don't want to go there. We're not going to be the see-all and be-all of the transportation for the town.
Thank you. In the spirit of moving along, we've got a large agenda that we haven't really gotten far into. I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor Cox, and then Councillor Sobel, we can come back to you, and if you're prepared to put a motion, then we can discuss that motion. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think most of us are sensing your frustration, and I do want to point out that as Councillor Bauer has said, as Councillor Montgomery has said, as actually everyone has said, we don't want you to go away. We don't want anything to happen to you. We're just trying to make this more feasible. I hear you saying all this stuff about the past, and we need to move forward. So let's forget how it was done in the past, and let's try and go forward and try and come to a solution. I love the fact that Councillor Sobel brought up that we could do something in an MOU for an 18-month period so that we could go back to the table and we can hash this out. But I also would like to see a couple things change. You said something today that you haven't said yet, and I loved it, and I'm proposing that we take, you said you've gotten very lean in your budget, and that's to do with wages. So if I take your calculations for your user fees that you've already collected, your donations that you've already collected, and our money, you're already in a surplus for 2021. So I would like to say that on a go-forward basis for the next 18 months, if we choose to give you the $175,000 for 2021, which is already in our budget, as well as for 2022, I want to see the users in Strathmore pay nothing. You don't need their money. You can make your budget by donations only. And we can need to come up with a method in which is feasible for the town as well as for our residents. So the most complaints, the most we've heard is that it's too expensive for those that can't afford it, that can't do it. So that's my goal. My goal is to give you enough money to make your budget for the year, not to make you money, but to also give back to the clients that need it, the vulnerable. Therefore, I don't have a problem giving you $175,000 to complete your year or for next year, but I don't want to see any Strathmore residents paying for your service.
Councillor Sobel.
Thank you. Your Worship, I'm ready with the motion. I would move that Council approve the Memorandum of Understanding with the Strathmore Handybus Association for 2021-2022 at a funding level of $175,000 per year, and direct administration to offset the 2020 account receivable of $74,695 from the Strathmore Handybus against the 2021 funding.
And now that we have a motion on the floor, Councillor Peterson, then Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in favor of this motion for the following reasons. First of all, time is really of the essence. We need to make sure that the Handybus has stability going forward. And so we already have the money in the budget for 2021. And we have already made plans out to 2024, so we do have that predictability built into this. Councillor Sobel's motion gives us two things. It gives us assurance that the Handybus can continue to operate with efficiency. And the second thing, it also allows time to look into all of those considerations that have been brought up by the Handybus Association, by members of this council. And it allows us to look for some really, really collaborative and creative solutions. So maybe any money that would come from the county would just simply come from a shuttle service to bring people in. I'm not a county resident, but I have a lot of family in the county, and I can see how this would nurture their communities to be able to keep people living in those communities so they don't have to move to a larger urban center to be able to access this. And if I was a member of the county, that's where I'd be looking to put my funding. From a Strathmore perspective, I think we clearly have to understand that when 90% of the ridership is from our community, and that a significant portion of the monies from the Handybus, aside from what we give, are going to subsidize that already, it doesn't make sense to me to not have our ridership pay. That doesn't allow them to continue to supplement reserves for replacement of vehicles. And that is and to look at having to hire staff, which they're clearly going to have to do into the future, and also to be able to accommodate a new barn service for looking after their vehicles. And so all of those things make it not feasible. But I think one of the things that would be feasible would be a really wholesome discussion on how we can do threshold testing for people who can't afford. Many of the people that ride the Handybus that have voiced their opinions to me are people who can afford, and they are very, very happy with what's happening. The report from Wheatland Lodge that Councillor Montgomery referenced spoke extremely highly of the transition and how it has impacted the people at the lodge. And they have many ideas in terms of how to accommodate threshold funding. And the ideas that they have will require collaboration through the Wheatland Family and Community Support Services, the Strathmore Family and Community Support Services, and everything from the PCN, from the primary care network, to home care facilities in the community. All of those have a role to play, and an ad hoc committee post-election could do a tremendous amount to be able to further those concerns. But as I said, time is of the essence. Giving that 18 months that Councillor Sobel has referenced in his motion does give a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to make this transition really work. And I'm very much in favor of the motion, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got CAO, and then we'll do Deputy Mayor Cox.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no question this is an essential service for the community and for the regional partners that we're talking about here. And they do need funding to stay sustainable. And I would caution council against waiving fees for ridership for members, because they need to generate a surplus every year to continue to fund their reserves. They're currently underfunded in their reserves for the replacement of their fleet. So I'd just like to add that caution to council that they need to generate a surplus every year from operations and put that into reserve for the replacement of their fleet. And at some point, they're going to have to be dealing with a new bus barn because the current one will not always be there for them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support the motion the way it's been brought forward. I hear that you need a surplus, and I do believe we will be providing you with a surplus. With $175,000, you only need to raise $50,000 in a year before you're into surpluses. You've already raised, to the end of June, which is only 6 months, you've raised almost $70,000. So basically, you're already $20,000 over, and it was only as of the end of June. So you do have money that's going to be coming in reserves. And you told us that your wages have dramatically dropped. Therefore, I think we do need to give that savings back to our clientele. Whether or not you charge nothing, okay, but the charge needs to be minimal. That's what we see. That is the biggest problem. That's why we're lacking in ridership. That's why we're lacking that. The only complaint that has come forth is the cost that I've heard. Your service is needed, but the cost is too expensive for a certain amount of riders. I will support you. I will give my vote to give money, but not if you're going to continue to charge our citizens $70 a trip.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to, I guess, address one thing. So first of all, like the purchase of vans is generally provided for by government grants. The association gets capital grants that they generally use to pay for the vans. So it's generally not coming from reserves unless there's a matching grant, and where they buy 2 vans at a time. The fleet is quite new. I believe they have 6 or 7 at this point that are, all, probably most of which are under warranty still, actually, is how new they are. With regards to the bus barn as well, through my research into looking at other associations, to be honest, other associations, in the area, when they find out that we give $175,000 to our handy bus, they look at, their eyes pop out of their head, because that, High River, for instance, which has the same population as us, they get $20,000 from the town, okay? And they don't store their vans in a heated bus barn. They keep them on a lot that is, that is kind of granted to them to use, and if it's a cold night, then the drivers take the bus or the van home, and they plug it in, and they get compensated for the electricity that it uses. So suggest that, like there's, the association or the service will fail, because, we aren't plowing money into, reserves or into a new bus barn. That's just not reflecting, the reality on the ground. And to address, I guess, the numbers themselves. So last night we were presented with a document that said that the total expenses for the year are projected to be $222,000. And they are projecting at this point revenues in the form of donations and like in charges to the clients, around $140,000, which leaves $80,000 to be made up. Okay, correct me if I'm off on the math, but 220 minus 140 is 80. So if we were to give them $175,000, we would be basically giving them a $95,000 surplus for this year alone. And to Councillor Cox's point, I care more about, the Handy Bus Association is a private, not-for-profit transportation organization or transportation company, essentially. The only difference between them and a taxi is that they're not-for-profit and therefore able to access some grants. So like I said, I have all the respect in the world for the board members, but the association itself, I care more about the people of Strathmore than the association, because as I said, the people of Strathmore are not the association. And if we can provide the same service or even better for the same money or less, okay, then that is what I care about more. And so when Councillor Cox brings up the idea of subsidizing the actual rates, that's what I'm all for. And I presented an idea to the board, which actually got, almost half the board to buy into, okay? And this was an idea where, yes, we would partner with taxi companies in town. The Handy Bus would still have provided trips to Calgary, because at the time that was their let's say competitive strength. And the way it worked out budget wise was we could have provided well, the numbers were like, I'm laughing because it was kind of silly how different the situation could have been. We could have been providing free or even $2 one-way trips to seniors in town, and a lot more trips than we are talking about providing for the same amount of money. And I mean thousands and thousands of trips. We could actually get seniors moving around this community, out, visiting their friends, out on social trips, all times of the day and the night, not having to worry about, the time of day or anything like that. The possibility is there. And so when I hear, just more of the same, that's why I have such a problem with this, because I know with my own experience, my own knowledge, that this does not have to be the way it's done. We can do better for our citizens. We have to do better. This is the one lever we have to pull. This is the time to pull it. And I'm suggesting to council that we don't rush into this. We sit there and we think very carefully about how we want to pull the lever and what we want to see happen when we pull the lever, because we can do a lot better. We can provide, as Councillor Cox said, just based on the numbers that we were provided last night, $140,000 revenue so far this, at the end of this year, versus $220 for expenses. That leaves $80,000 to be made up. So according to the numbers, the charges that the clients will pay works out to about, let's say, $60,000 to $70,000. We could actually have paid for every ride for free that the association, did for our residents this year, and that's what matters to me is actually providing a truly subsidized service. It's not subsidized when they're charging the same rate as any other transportation company in town that's actually making a profit. Okay, that's yeah. So that's the issue with just kind of rushing back into an agreement without any sort of stipulations. The other issue I have with the MOU itself is, so during my time as president on the board, it came to our attention that that there had been this funding arrangement to build the bus barn. Okay, and so in case anybody doesn't have the details in front of them, the association managed to get a grant from the provincial government for about $100,000. And then they needed about another $75,000 or so to build this, basically attach a metal building onto the end of our existing building on one of our properties in town here. And so the county, they provided half of that money, and then the town provided the other half. So, let's say around, $37,000 or so each. I had this former CAO look into the situation and to see, what legal claim the association actually had to the land or to the bus barn itself, and I looked in the handy bus kind of documents as well. There's nothing at all to suggest that there was any sort of arrangement or agreement that the association would ever be compensated for the town, essentially taking over what they were allowing the association to use. The association paid no money as far as leasing that spot, leasing the land during that entire time. And so it doesn't make sense to me, given that the association is sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars already, and that's including money that they've, well, not even including money that they've set aside for the purchase of new vans, but as they depreciate. And it doesn't make sense to me that, for instance, we would, considering that we provided, around 30% of the money, and Wheatland County provided 30% of the money, it doesn't make any sense to me that we would pay the association the full value of the barn. Why would we take 30% of the money for ourselves and give Wheatland County back 30% of the money? And I guess in some ways you could say that the association, morally has, some right to that $100,000. But again, they didn't, pay to use that spot, the land that the bus barn was sitting on either. So I think that it's up for debate, to be honest, whether or not the association should be given that money. It doesn't make any sense, that it would be at the town's sole expense to cover the cost of the appraisal. We don't even know what the appraised, value is. If the association wants to do an appraisal on it and come to us and say, hey, here's what we think it's worth, we think that it'd be great if you guys would, give us this money, in light of the fact that we did, secure a grant for part of the cost of it, I'd be willing to entertain that. But to just say that, that the town at their sole expense will appraise it and then will pay out that full appraised amount, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I don't see the value, to be honest, that anybody's getting from that. I don't agree with entering into an 18-month funding arrangement. Again, with the way it's written, we can do a lot better, and we must do a lot better for our residents and for our taxpayers. As I said, there's other models out there, and those need to be looked at. If the association is an independent organization, and they're certainly free to operate however they like, and that's just the bottom line. We, on the other hand, are free to fund them or not fund them, and we're also free to fund them contingent on whatever rules or parameters we want to put on it. And so if we want them to operate certain days of the week, they can choose to do that, or they can choose to not do that if they don't want our money. But that's our right to choose. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to, administration has, a couple of times now put before us a couple of different versions of an MOU, which basically say the same thing, but which don't actually speak to the needs of the community at all. And it's essentially just, putting money towards something and hoping something will happen. And we don't even have any idea what we want to happen. We don't know, we don't actually have, the data, as far as we haven't been provided the data, we haven't been provided some of the other information that we've asked for. We haven't been provided a real budget. Any other organization that comes before us and asks for funding, and we don't have anybody that comes asking for this level of funding, to be honest. They provide everything that they could possibly think of to us for information. They provide projections. They provide, they say, here's what we're going to do with the money. Here's what you can expect. And we see none of that here. And that's, I can't get behind signing a blank check, basically knowing that that there's other better ways to do it. And so I'm asking the rest of council to hold off on supporting this funding agreement. The association, this is not a pressing concern. As Ms. Booth said last night, if the town doesn't pay anything at all, yeah, the association in a few years will run out of money. That's certainly true. And I'm not suggesting we wait a few years. I've been pushing for months now to sit down and have an actual conversation about this. This has been gone about kind of backwards to me, putting the agreement in front of us and then having us discuss, what we want, when we should have been discussing what we want and then making the agreement based on that. So for that reason, and all the other reasons that I've kind of outlined, I won't be able to support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Councillor Sobel, you have a motion on the floor. How would you feel, maybe this would be amenable to more people, how would you feel about an amendment where we would continue this funding for the current 2021 year with direction to administration to bring this MOU back to the new council, who would then appoint someone to what Alice is saying, a small group that would work through to do this MOU and to work to find a solution that's good for the county, the villages, and the town. How do you feel about that, and would that be something that might work?
Your Worship, I thought that cutting the funding model down in half would accomplish a couple of things, but mostly give the association some time to get their ducks in a row and to do many of the things that they want to do. Let's not. I think it's important to remember that this is a group of volunteers, not an organization that we provide a salary to, and their intent cannot be questioned. This is something that they're doing for our seniors, for people with handicaps, and it is an essential service. So I want to give them enough time, and I want to give our new council some time to get comfortable in the position. And I think there's going to be, as I said, there's going to be lots of changes in the next year. But I really do believe that they need this 18 months to really be prepared to come back for the next level of discussions on funding, in a competent manner. But they need some time, I think, to do that. So I won't accept it as a friendly amendment, but certainly if there's an amendment, I would be prepared to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I first of all just want to say thank you to Councillor Sobel for putting forward his motion. I think the intent of the motion is solid. I commend him for trying to do something different and get this done. Although the support for this handy bus is critical, I don't think the MOU that we have in front of us, and I don't think the numbers and the questions that we've asked are quite, I'm not quite ready to put another $175,000 on the table so that the handy bus can get their ducks in a row. I cannot say to the people of Strathmore, of, I believe, less than 10% of seniors that are actually using the handy bus, that I can say that this is fiscally responsible, that I'm giving money to people and then they get their ducks in a row. I have all the information in front of me. I want to know what their purpose is. I want to know who they're serving, how they arrived at their numbers, how much each trip costs, where they're going, and how, I'm learning things here. I think that there's more conversation to be had here. And if it's not going to be done in council, then perhaps we can have a representative go back to the board and we can ask more questions and go from there. But right now, I'm just not willing to support this motion.
Your worship,
Sorry.
I have a
Thank you.
question for clarification.
A question for Councillor Bauer?
Well, just for clarification to
Okay.
administration.
Oh, for administration?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question to administration is, we've already put this council already put the $175,000 in the budget, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is $175,000 in the current budget.
So
for
this,
handiwork.
this council made that decision by consensus, I believe, already. That's my understanding.
Sorry,
Either-
is that for 2022?
2021, and
It's not in the 2022 budget that's coming to us?
no,
We have not approved any 22 budget.
right, but it is in the 2021 budget. So I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Bauer's comments, we already made the decision for the $175,000 for 2021.
And Councillor Peterson, may I ask, which MOU were we supporting? Because I don't see a current MOU in front of us that we supported at the budget time. There wasn't an MOU in place, is that correct?
So what I'm saying is, just with response to your comment about the 175,000, council approved the 175,000. We did not approve a new MOU. My understanding is we were working on the 2009 MOU. That would have been a tacit understanding that we were working off that MOU. And so we did approve it. It would have sat within that current agreement. So I just think that it's a nuance, but it's really important. We did already approve the 175,000 for 2021.
Thank you.
My comment on this is I would support Councillor Sobel's motion if the MOU did not have the section B where we're responsible for the bus barn, because this is the first time I've heard that we may not legally be responsible for the value of the bus barn. And if that's true, I'd love to see that in writing. I don't feel comfortable with the MOU where we might be responsible, or taxpayers might be responsible for the value of a building that we don't necessarily legally have responsibility for. So again, if we're looking at a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding over the 2-year period, I would support that if the MOU did not have that section in on the bus barn. Mr. LaCour.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is no formal written agreement regarding the bus barn. We were provided with some financial information by the Handy Bus Association, and it gives us detail on the split of the funding, and Mr. Teedy is aware of it as well, but there is nothing in writing. Thank you.
Councillor Sobel, can I go back to you then as far as your motion? Is your motion then accepting the MOU but for that 18-month period? I just want I guess I'm just looking for clarification. You're looking at the motion concerning an 18-month period, but does your motion take into account that we'd be approving the MOU as it stands?
Well, it does, Your Worship, but as you just indicated, and I agree, this is the first I hear of from Councillor Montgomery about some of the details of the bus barn. I certainly wish those comments had been made months ago, and I'm, to be quite honest with you, a little disappointed that this is the first I'm hearing about that. So I'm just wondering if any of our guests have comment in regards to the bus barn, Your Worship.
Alice, do you have any comments, or Florence?
Given the new information.
Yeah, what I can comment on is this. It was clearly, as one of the councillors were concerned about the land. The land was put up by the town for the building to go on. So it was an agreement between the two councils. It wasn't in writing, no, but it's acted in the documents that we set forth and we attached to the MOU we gave to the town. So it shows the schedules, it shows that the town owns the land So the town is saying to us, we are going to sell the bus barn sometime, that building, not just the bus barn, but the whole building. So when they went into this agreement, they attached it to the existing building and was donated the land to do that, to be used. We weren't asked, it was part of their money and their way of making the organization grow and be there for future. That is my view on it, sitting on the board and working with councils. That seems to be what has happened. So as far as a written agreement, but there certainly was a meeting of the minds of all of the people involved. So we have paid for security in the barn. We have paid for fuel. We've paid for telephones. So as far as paying per se a rent, there never was a meeting of the minds between the two parties that we would pay a rent and then supply the big portion of the money to build the building at that time. And which what it is in-kind donation, more or less, to the association to make it viable and for the greater good of the seniors of what you were trying to accomplish at that time. So basically, that's basically all I can say. And as you are the owner of the land and the rest of the building, you have said to us, we intend to sell it. And if you're the seller, normally in real estate, the seller is the one that does the appraisal. So you want to sell it, then you have to have it appraised. And I think it's only right that the money follows the association so it can stay viable, build a new barn or whatever later on. But right now, everything would be lost by turning it all back to the town. So where would that leave the association without a barn, without any funds to even move forward? And as few of the councillors suggested, we just have too much money here that we need to spend it. And so there's no funding, there's no reserve, there's no nothing. So that becomes a reserve to move forward. So you want to sell the building? I think the value of the barn alone is all that this document would suggest that should come back to the association. That's my view. Thank you.
So I guess my question following Alice's comments is, if the town and the county provided $75,441.46 and that was split between them, then wouldn't that be, I guess that would be the amount that you're saying is should come to you as far as the MOU goes?
Well, yes, because I don't think any one of the councillors would say, here's some money, but we want it back. It was donated. So if you donate it, it's a donation.
Thank you.
Now that the barn is worth a little more money and we don't want to, talk about that, all of a sudden, well, we donated it, now we want it back. Is that the view? Do you think that this was the two councils would have had that in mind when they did this? To me, no, it wouldn't have been.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that. I understand that thinking. I do understand what you're saying now. That makes a difference to me.
And Your Worship, if I can, I appreciate those comments as well, and I'm not prepared to make an amendment on my motion, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Worship. Just two comments. My first being that if the town of Strathmore was operating the handy bus back when you say the donation was made, I would consider that an asset. And I don't know what Mr. Teedy's point of view with that, on that would be, but if the town was essentially giving to their own nonprofit that they were helping to fund, then, you know, that is part of what we own. Separate to that, and I will ask you to comment on that, Mr. Teedy, if you wouldn't mind. Second to that, I just want to ask, when, let me get my thoughts in here. Sorry. Your Worship, would you please come back to me? Or would you
Sure,
mind
and I
commenting on
think-
that, and I could try and think of what my question was?
Sure, and I think we'll have you be the last counselor to
Thank you.
speak, because I think everybody's spoken twice. We've had some long comments too, and we do have a lot of agenda to get through. So, Mr. Teedy, if you could weigh in specifically on the bus barn donation, and then we'll come back to Councillor Bauer, then I'll call the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. The bus barn was created as a result of amounts contributed by each party, which included the province with a grant of approximately the 100,000, and then amounts paid by the town and by the county. The value of the building was not considered an asset by the association. It's built on town land. It adjoins the municipal garage, and there was no intent, I believe, I see no documentation to support the fact that it was an asset of the association. It has really no monetary value other than the use of the building. There's no intent that that building could be removed as is to another site. It has no future capital value other than the ongoing use of the building. As such, it has no financial statement value, if you'd like. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And Your Worship, if I may just ask my last question. Yep. Councillor Peterson said that the amount has already been budgeted for 2021. If that amount has been approved, why did you not release the funds to the handy bus? Were you not waiting for this MOU to be approved before you released the funds?
The amount was in the 2021 budget. At the time the budget was prepared in 20, there was no discussion about a future MOU. The future MOU, or the one that we're looking at today, was created in this current year to reflect the situation as it is. When the budget was prepared in 2020 for 2021, we had the original 2009 MOU, and it wasn't until the late last year, and we didn't know until actually this year, when the handy bus gave notice that they were going to separate and no longer utilize the town as the deliverer of the service. So when the budget was prepared, it was business as usual in 2020 for the 2021 year.
Your Worship, may I ask a clarifying?
And we did not release the funding as a result of the over expenditure for the expenses paid by the town on behalf of the association. We had wanted to recover, as we had done in past years, the over expenditure. Each of the years, expenses paid by the town exceeded the grant, and we had always done an evening up in the mid-year point once we received the audited financial statement to support that the amount that the association owed to the town. And so there had been no discussion on that. Administration was of the opinion until that happened, we were not going to forward any funds. We have never written a check to the Handy Bus Association. It was always amounts paid on behalf of the association was the funding. That was how we supplied the funding to the association, by paying their bills. And so that continued even into 2021. We paid the January bills, and there's been no discussion about that either. But anyways, that's how we paid the funding. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
So I have one question, and then I'm going to call the vote.
Yeah, it's just a clarifying question for you, Mel. Just because it's in the budget, $175,000, doesn't mean that we have to spend it.
Well, the corporate plan included that as a funding and as business as usual. No, council is always within their rights to amend the budget.
Your worship.
We really have to
Just a
vote.
clarification.
Okay, thank you.
So I apologize, Your Worship, but so my understanding then is that we have remitted no funding to the Handy Bus except for the January expenses. And so is there, I guess my question for clarification, is there anything preventing administration at this point in paying for what is left over from the budget, minus the $74,695 in the accounts to offset the account receivable, plus the January funding? So say somewhere in the area of probably $90,000, $91,000 that would be outstanding from that $175,000. Is there anything preventing administration from, now that the budget has not been amended, to remitting that amount of money to the Handy Bus in the 2021 year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it would be appropriate for administration to release 2021 funding without an MOU in place. We can release up till January 31st, but beyond that, we should not be releasing any funds without having an MOU in place. And I think that's only diligent and responsible for administration to take that position.
And to follow that up, that we paid that until January because we were still under the old MOU at that point in time and under the old agreement. And as of February the 1st, the Handy Bus became an independent entity, and that's why we need a new MOU moving forward.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. When they became independent, we needed to do an MOU, a new MOU, sorry.
Thank you. Deborah, would you be able to read back the motion by Councillor Sobel?
Yes, Your Worship. Councillor Sobel's resolution is that council approve the MOU with the Strathmore Handy Bus Association for 2021-2022 at a funding level of $175,000 per year and direct administration to offset the 2020 account receivable of $74,695 from the Strathmore Handy Bus against the 2021 funding.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion now. I'll call the motion. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is defeated. So administration, where do we go from here? Will this come back to the new council then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will have some further discussions with the Handy Bus Association, and we will come back to council at some point, whether it's with this council or the next council. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And Alice and Florence, thank you very much for taking your time out today. Thank you for all your work that you do on the Handy Bus Association. I know you have a long history with that group, and your efforts for seniors and those in need is really appreciated, and hopefully the new council and administration can work with you. And I like your idea, Alice, of a small working group to work with the county and get things going. So, but thank you very much.
And thank you,
Thank you for
everyone,
having us.
for that discussion.
All right, we move on to confirmation of minutes. 5.1, the adoption of the July 14th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I would move adoption of the July 14th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. It didn't come from Mark, but all in favor. And Councillor Montgomery? Thank you. All right, we move on to 8.1, which is the amended one, CRU utilization. And Deborah, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could we please move into Committee of the Whole?
Sure, sorry, yes. A motion to go into Committee of the Whole. Deputy Mayor Cox, all in favor? And we're now, we move on to, we have no unfinished business or tabled reports. We move on to CR utilization. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm here to discuss about the temporary relocation of Municipal Enforcement Department into the CRU space. As listed in my report, the pending sale of the old municipal building necessitated the move of municipal enforcement to a new area within the town. Unfortunately, no other buildings offer adequate office space, and so the CRU space was identified as a temporary option for these individuals until more suitable accommodations can be made. If there's, that's pretty much my report. If there's any questions from council, I'm here if I can answer them.
Thank you, Mark. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm confused. I might have missed something, but I thought that the portables or cabanas, as they were called, were relocated to behind the fire station, and that was going to hold municipal enforcement. All along, I've thought that happened. So when did it not happen? And why did it not happen?
We can go to Mr. Legore for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I made it clear to council last fall, right after budget was approved, and I also spoke to it against this spring, that it was not good value for dollar to spend $175,000 moving the cabanas from their existing site to the fire hall. You still have zero value in those buildings. They're at their end of their life. They've made no financial sense to move them forward to the other location. And I made council very aware of that, and we looked at other options, and we are still looking at another option for a long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Sorry. So I just have some questions about, not so much about the idea of putting them in the CRU space, but so last year there was a resolution passed in April to leave that space unfinished, and I noticed that, you know, first of all, there's a building permit that was issued in the middle of August to begin work in that CRU space, and I'm just wondering how that seems to contravene the resolution that was passed by council. So I'm just wondering how that came to happen. How did we get to the point where you know, a building permit was issued almost a month ago, contrary to a resolution of council?
Thank you. Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was at my direction that they do minimal improvements to the CRU space. I think we need to realize here the basic work that we're doing in there is flooring, electrical lighting. There's no walls being built or anything. The motion that was made by council previously, of which a copy is attached to the minutes, it says that the council not finish the CRU space at that time. At that time, that decision was made by council based on a funding model. We didn't know whether there would be sufficient funds for the balance of the building. So they did not proceed with finishing the CRU. There was nothing there that stated at that time it had to come back to council for a further motion. And anything that is being spent on it will serve whatever final use is in the CRU space. If it does become a CRU use, what we're doing there is more than adequate to meet those needs. There's nothing that's being wasted on that. It's very minimal dollars being spent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does that alleviate your concerns, Councillor Montgomery?
Sorry, and so Mr. Legore, are you suggesting that at some point the resolution of council expired?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Are you saying that the resolution that was passed by council last April that expired at some point?
If I could answer that, I don't necessarily think it's a question of expiring. I think it's just a matter of doing the bare bones of development of it. Wouldn't nullify or work against that resolution, because it's only being brought up to the basic standards so that anything could go in there. We still haven't decided as a council what will go in there, but none of this stuff will impede, none of the work done will impede any new direction by council. The resolution still stands that we're going to decide what's there, but they've just brought it up to just so that you could put the enforcement officers in there temporarily. And at one time early on in the Strathmore Municipal Building Project Plan, enforcement was going to be in this building, and it was one of the selling points and one of the speaking points that I used to kind of sell the idea that this would be a good location for a town hall, that the enforcement officers would be right downtown in the park. So I think it's I don't think any of the work done has gone against the spirit or the intent of the resolution. It's just bare bones development. So the resolution is still in place.
If I could, so I'm asking again, Mr. Legore, did the council resolution that was passed last April, did that expire at some point? And if so, when?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that motion does not expire at any point. That motion took effect April 15th at the 7 o'clock meeting, and it said the council not finish it at this time. It doesn't mean that it had to come back to council or anything to what's being done there. The work that's being done there will meet whatever the future use of that space becomes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
But I believe the resolution, says that the room will remain unfinished.
But it's not finished.
If the resolution doesn't expire, then I believe that that the room must remain unfinished until council approves it to be finished, the resolution said it would remain unfinished.
But Councillor Montgomery,
and regardless of whether or not we're painting the walls or putting flooring in and working on the ductwork and other things like that is finishing the space. I don't think anybody would, I don't think anybody could rightfully, suggest that that there isn't finishing work going on. Otherwise, what are they doing in there at all? If it's just, it's not like there's no floor at all. There's a concrete floor in there. So why would we be putting flooring in there if we're not finishing it? So I have to suggest that the work that's been conducted so far is contrary to the motion or the resolution that was passed by council. And I'm curious to know where the money is coming from to buy the materials that were purchased.
Well, I guess my
Mr.
view.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should have said I'm asking administration where the
So I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to comment to your concerns about whether it's a finished space now. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's. Are
you ruling that
that's obviously debatable? I guess I'm asking where the money.
Are you just saying that I can't speak to what you just said? I've allowed you to speak to many things.
Yeah, this is Your Worship. This is somewhat, according to parliamentary procedure, this is my time, and I'm not asking you for clarification. I'm asking administration for answers to these questions. If you would like to speak later to it, I'm sure that's probably fine.
Sure, I'll speak later to it then.
Okay, yes, thank you. So as I said, I would like to know where the money is coming from that purchased the materials that are currently in that space.
Mr. LaGordy, do you want to speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only option we have for enforcement services at this time is the CRU space. It's either that or we put them on the street. We have a tentative offer, a tentative closing date of September 30th on the existing town office. We need to get them out of there before September 30th in case that building sells. Where else do you locate them to? That's the end of it. There's no other choice. They have to go to the CRU space. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just add, I don't see that the space is finished. For example, if we were to put a commercial site in there, there would have to be possibly sink, kitchen, bathroom facilities in there if there was going to be any eating. So I don't see it as a finished space. And I think there also has to be some trust in place for our CAO and our administration that whatever is being done is just the bare bones so that the enforcement officers have a place to be temporarily, and then we'll decide as a group what it's going to be next. And as far as me being allowed to speak, Councillor Montgomery, there is some leeway in a typical council meeting. In fact, if I wanted to get exacting, we could time the amount of time that people speak too. And you know, the number of times that people speak, we could get very, very strict as far as that goes too. So, you know, people need to have some leeway and some respect for each other if we're trying to have a dialogue and possibly add some input into things. Did you have another question?
Your Worship, I'm simply looking for information from administration. And again, I need an answer as to where the money is coming from that purchased the materials that are in that space right now.
Through the chair, Councilor Montgomery, I'm going to have to speak with the finance department to determine the exact account or GL that money came from. So I'm fortunate I can't answer that question at this time.
Because I'm under the impression we did not allocate any money in our capital budget towards finishing that space. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, if it was to be leased out to a commercial entity, which I'm not saying I'm for or against that, the commercial entity would be responsible for putting flooring in and other finishing aspects. And so we wouldn't be spending that money at all. I'm concerned, you know, as far as trust goes, I'm concerned that nobody at administration and nobody that on council that knew that this was happening prior to, you know, me learning of it last week, nobody said, hey, by the way, there's a resolution from council that this space remain unfinished and you should probably, you know, look to get that changed or even get some money allocated from the budget, you know, to finish the space. So I'm concerned about the way that this has been handled. And I don't think that I'm offside by being concerned about the fact that decisions contrary to resolutions of council are being made, purchases are being made of capital, you know, of the capital sort without council approval. That's concerning to me. And council, I mean, like one of council's responsibilities is capital spending, and so this is, to me, this is kind of in line with what our responsibilities are, which is why I'm raising this now. Thank you.
Mr. Teedy.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was a unspent capital money pertaining to this building in the budget, and that is where the money was coming from for the spend on the amount, and I can't speak to the dollar amount that we're spending right now, but that is where the budget money was coming from.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. I cannot I cannot state more than once how confused I am. I'm confused about process. I thought that when a resolution was made by council that it's binding unless a councillor that voted for the motion brought it back. And so I'm confused that this is being brought forward to us, that a building permit on space has already been taken out, materials have been purchased, because I went back into my notes and I looked and it said, like, we had a really, really colorful discussion on what was to be done with this space. And part of the thing that we were told was that there was no extra money. And so I'm wondering, you know, it's so confusing for me that now we have municipal enforcement who, yes, they need a secure location. I understand that. I understand that we have a counselor's room upstairs that is rarely used by counselors. Like, I think that there's other things that we can look at. And, you know, this space, I personally was really hoping that we would get some, you know, commercial front, you know, and I don't know, Councillor Cox said, you know, s'more, what was it? You had a great idea for using all of the local products in Strathmore and having a vendor in there highlight what we have to offer our residents. Some people, you know, suggested an ice cream shop. Some people suggested a cafe. But those logistics were not, we didn't make a decision on anything. And so how municipal enforcement is just going in there when, if we have extra money, we can direct it to space on Main Street and rent space for a couple months while we can discuss this. But I really would have liked to have had an opportunity as a council to understand why we're pressured into making this decision and what other options are there. I'm just confused that this space is being taken away when it could be provided to nonprofit groups for board meetings. It could be provided for commercial. Like, there's still a lot of ideas. And once we put municipal enforcement there, they're going to get comfortable. They're not going to be able to, you know, just up and leave. And if we're putting that space for them, there's certain concessions that need to be made. And then what are we going to do? Like, dig it up and change it for someone else? There's no timeline on this. So I'm very confused, and I'm just not sure of process. Could you explain to me how things are brought back, please, Mr. Legore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, bylaw would relocate there. They can be relocated out of there at any time if we have another spot. In our current financial situation, it does not make sense to go out and rent property to put bylaw enforcement in on a temporary basis. I'm going to go a little beyond that. We have a respectful workplace policy in place with this town. If you want to berate administration, then take it in camera. I'm the one that made the decision, and I stand by it. And if you want to berate me, then you should be doing it in camera. Look at the staff you have here. Look at the public you have listening to this. And you're raking administration through garbage over this. This is a common sense decision. Where else do you put them? Do you want them to work out of their vehicles on the street? Thank you.
Mr. Legore, how many officers do we have?
Pori, I didn't get the question.
How many bylaw officers do we have?
We have 4 bylaw officers.
Okay, thank you.
And we just were fortunate enough to get a new manager. I hope she hang around after watching this.
Thank you. Councillor Sobel, did you have a follow-up? Councillor Bauer?
I'm so sorry.
Councillor Sobel?
Yeah, thank you. You know what? I was basically going to say what Mr. Legore just said, and you know, I'm so disappointed in how this is going. This is a common sense decision. Our CAO has some leeway and some authority. There's money there's not, you know, the questions being asked would suggest that maybe there's something wrong going on. There's something illegal. This room is not finished. It's got a floor put in it. This is not finishing a room. So, you know, let's just step back here and try to use a little bit of common sense instead of trying to rip everybody and drag them through the mud. And by the way, this is a fantastic idea, and I hope that the idea of keeping municipal enforcement in that location on a permanent basis comes back hopefully to the next council who perhaps has more common sense. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. So at this point, Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So to be clear, I'm not disparaging or criticizing municipal enforcement. I think it's unfortunate that they've been, put in a situation where, like the space they were using was kind of sold out from under them. That's not their fault at all. I don't see why we have to put, some. Well, first of all, actually, I'd like to know from administration. It's clear that, obviously the materials have been purchased. So does administration have a contractor lined up to do the work, or how is that being handled?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's being handled by a contractor.
Okay, and what was the amount that we've agreed to pay to do the work in that space?
That was answered, Your Worship. Well, it was answered where?
I would like to know the dollar figure of the, sorry, what?
I think if we're going to continue along your line of questions, I think we should go in camera, because this is carrying into doubt and suspicion again. And I think I think if we're going, I think if you look back at some of the wording at the very start, you'll see that there's some things said that I think it makes sense for us to discuss this in camera, out of the public eye.
Pardon me. I believe that I don't believe that there needs to be any. If an agreement has been signed with a contractor, I don't believe that needs to be discussed in camera. I think that we're allowed to discuss the amount that we're paying somebody, or that we've agreed to pay to do the work in that space, whether we call it finishing or not. And I would like to know the amount that we are paying, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it'll be under $50,000.
Okay, so we're paying.
And there is sufficient funds within the remaining budget for this building.
Okay, so we're paying almost, let's say, under $50,000 to not finish that space, so that municipal enforcement can be in there temporarily. And again, this is, I don't like that it's being painted as suspicion or as problematic, that I'm trying to ensure that our processes and policies and resolutions are being respected, that money is being spent, capital money is being spent with the approval of council. I don't think any of these things are offside. It's not offside for me to inquire how we came to be in a place where building permits have been issued, agreements have been signed with contractors to do work that contravenes a resolution of council. And you know what? I'm not even criticizing members of administration. That's, you know what, I understand the position people are in. I want to make sure that our process, there's honestly, and I said this to you, Mr. Mayor, if we're not going to make sure that our resolutions are being respected, and we're going to make sure that, you know, we're in control of how the money is spent, we might as well not be here. That is our job and our function. And that I take that very seriously. I take that responsibility very seriously, which is why I sit here and I debate, what may be petty points to you. To me, almost $50,000 is not petty, especially if it's money that we don't have to spend. And to Councillor Bauer's point, I mean, to go and rent a space for a couple of months would cost us a few $1,000s, not $40,000 to $50,000. And I guess I'd like to know at this, this is, I don't like conflict. Okay, I'm not the one that took us down this road, but I'd like to know if council does not approve to finish this space, how do we get out of a contract or a deal that's been signed? We've already purchased materials. How, and this is, I think it's absurd, to be honest. But I think, I think, yeah. What's our option if we don't, if we want to get out of, this? Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. My bigger question is to help both the public and maybe council understand discretion that a CAO has to make emergent decisions in the best interest of an organization. And it just might be time for us to hear about that discretionary process.
Kara, are you able to speak on the legislative side of that?
So I guess what I can say in terms of process, like this close to the election, what I can say is that we do have a very comprehensive process that will be coming forward to the new council. If this is something the council wants us to bring a presentation forward, talking specifically about roles and responsibilities between now and the election, it's something we can certainly do. But I guess we would look for that direction coming from all of council.
So in my experience in governance, Your Worship, certainly there is a budget under the unspent capital dollars in the building budget approved by this council. So this is not something new. So there is no deception. I don't see that that there's any disrespect. I don't see any misuse of funds. And I don't think that this constitutes finishing a building or a room. To me, what it does is it addresses an emergent situation and deals with it in a sound, logistical, and financially stable process. If this CAO had wanted to live to the letter of the council decision-making, he would have spent $175,000 plus moving the cabanas to the back of the fire hall, and probably they would have not survived the move, because we did find out after that April meeting that they wouldn't survive the move, that there was a very good chance that they wouldn't. The decision this council made in April 2020 and the discussion, that fulsome discussion, I think that everything that was spoken about in that discussion still stands and can still come to a new council. And I don't see that this is anything other than a commendable decision by an incredibly competent, responsible administration to do the very best that he can for our community and for the staff that are trying to protect our community, for bylaw and peace officers in this community. And certainly the council space upstairs, it would not suffice for them. And having the community have access to them in that CRU space for the time being too is good. And it also gives council an opportunity to think whether that's the use that they want to go going forward. But regardless, it's temporary. So I really do think that it's time to move on, that this was a good decision. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bauer.
Your Worship, I would just like to call a question, please. Okay. Well, then I'd like to say that, I'm definitely not willing to put municipal enforcement in the position where they don't have a home, that they need to work out of their cars, or that, this council does not support them. That is not the case. I think that, my initial concerns were about process, and I was just, confused. But in no way do I want municipal enforcement to bear the brunt of, maybe a few steps being missed, And so I would like to move ahead, and I would support this. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what I'm hearing is that we're going forward with this, that administration has enough authority to spend that money. My problem is more along with, we passed a resolution and now we're the ones that are being compromised. So it looks like our decisions are not valued. And that's where I think Jason, myself, and even Lorraine are unclear as to, we've made a decision, it was passed, and now our decision seems to mean nothing. That's where we're struggling. I hope, we're not trying to be disrespectful, we don't mean any disrespect. We're just wondering why we went through that huge process, because it was multiple discussions, and finally came to a decision that it wasn't a unanimous decision. So there is, contention on that issue, and now our decision is not being respected. That's where I have an issue. I understand that they need a place to go. I also know that there's a few offices up there, desks up there that aren't used. They're empty. Could they not relocate to upstairs for now? I don't know. What I'm saying is, we feel disrespected for our decision. That's all.
I guess my take on it is you'd have to decide if doing this bare bones work just so that bylaw can temporarily go in there constitutes going against our resolution, and it comes down to trust too. And I believe even before this council, when the town hall idea concept was coming up, bylaw was always a part of the building in our minds. And so that's why I'm not reacting to anything about this, because it seems to be just fulfilling what the initial space was intended to be way back in the initial plannings of the building. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would agree that this is contrary to a resolution if this was not a temporary action by the CAO. That's the big difference in this. If it was a permanent move, then it would be contrary to a resolution. It's not at present. And saying that, I'd like to make a motion on this. I'd move to first come out of committee of the whole, Your Worship.
Okay, we have a motion to come out of committee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we need to come out of committee of the whole.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion to come out of committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed? 4 in favor? So we're out of committee of the whole now, Councillor Sobel.
Thank you. I move that council approve the temporary relocation of the Municipal Enforcement Department to the CRU.
You were for. She was for. Sorry, can you do that again, Councillor Sobel?
Sure. I would move that council approve the temporary relocation of the Municipal Enforcement Department to the CRU space.
Thank you. Is there discussion on that motion? Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. And yeah, I guess I'll just take as much time as I need here. Which I believe I'm allowed 10 minutes. So
I'll set the timer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, you know what? I don't have a problem with putting municipal enforcement in there temporarily. I have a problem with spending between $40,000 and $50,000 to not finish a space. I don't see why we need to spend any money, and maybe that can be clarified. Actually, I'll ask administration that. Why do we need to spend any money in the space in order to put municipal enforcement in there temporarily? What type of work is critical to allowing municipal enforcement to function in that space temporarily? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would not have been a suitable work environment for them to move in there. There was no lights, insufficient lights, I should say, electrical, etc. They need certain tools to do their job. Money had to be spent for them to move in there. The space is not being finished. I want to make that clear. It's not being finished. We're doing minimal improvements to accommodate the temporary location of enforcement services.
Thank you. So I believe at the time at the discussion last year, the point was made. At the time, Councillor Sobel was suggesting that we finish the space as a meeting room, okay? And the total amount that administration said that it would take to finish the space as a meeting room was about $40,000 to $50,000, okay? So our, and just in case, so the public, so the public knows, for instance, the rest of the building, doesn't have flooring. It's a concrete floor in the rest of the building. There's no ceiling in most of the building. So, I don't think anybody here would claim that, the rest of the building wasn't finished. One of the issues that I've had during my time on council is being rushed into decisions. Every time that we have been rushed into a decision, there has usually been regret on the part of some councillors.
Point of order, Your Worship. Those are statements that have to be verified. Those are very. I find those insulting statements, Your Worship. It's insulting to our administration to say that.
Excuse me. Thank you. You might disagree with what I say, Councillor Sobel.
No, I said a point of order.
That's not a point of order. You can disagree with what I say, but that's not a point of order. I'm not. Let's say contravening any parliamentary rules.
Is our discussion not supposed to be strictly on the motion that's been put on the floor as far as temporarily moving the bylaw officers into there? Yeah.
One of the things that I found.
Sorry, if I can just get some guidance from Kara. We have a motion on the floor that deals with temporarily moving the bylaw officers into that CRU space. Does the discussion have to stay focused on that motion, or can we drift into going back to procedure and policy as far as how the CRU space was going to be developed?
So the debate should stay on in relation to the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. This is all about the motion. This is all about finishing the space. So again, I have an issue. Other members of council may or may not have an issue with the way we've been rushed into a number of decisions. There's been regret on my part for that happening, even though sometimes I disagreed with it and we rushed into them anyways. This is a case where decisions have already been made, triggers have been pulled, deals have been signed, okay, and now they're coming to us with these details. If I guess, and maybe members of council, can speak to this on their time, but I'd be interested to know if, a month ago, if we'd been approached, which there was no reason why we couldn't have been, or a month and a half ago, if members of council would have been fine spending $40,000 to $50,000 to not finish the space. I don't think, and again, there's concrete floors throughout the rest of the building, so I don't think it's a problem for municipal enforcement to work in there without, flooring, for instance. I just want to make sure that we are being responsible for the money that we are entrusted with. I want to make sure that we're accountable. We're not accountable when decisions are made for us, or with, after the fact, when people come to us and say, hey, why did you spend that money? We go, well, I didn't know it was happening, and it's like, well, why not? You're the person that, we chose to represent, and you're the one that's supposed to be, keeping track of this, stuff for us. And that's not happening sometimes, especially when we're being pressured into decisions or rushed into decisions. And you know what? And as far as the motion goes, to finish the space, I don't want to finish the space. I don't think it should be finished temporarily. I don't believe, and perhaps Mr. Teedy could answer this for me. I'm curious to know about how that works as far as if there's unspent capital dollars, does administration have free rein to spend those capital dollars on any other capital projects that they feel like without council approval? That's my question, please.
Within the budget policy that we presented.
Okay, sorry, if I could interject, Mel. If we're going to ask questions about what the CAO is allowed to do or not to do, I do believe that should be an in-camera discussion.
This is just about our own policies and processes, because I mean, like, I'll be honest, I'm shocked to learn. You know, for instance, they came to us and asked if we wanted to pay to put solar panels on the roof of the building. You know, they could have just taken that money and put the solar panels on without us, you know, approving it. So I'm wondering what the difference is between.
I think I'm going to rule that point of order is accurate, because we're supposed to be on the motion of whether or not we're going to move bylaw officers. That's the motion. If we're going to move bylaw officers into the CRU space right now.
Your Worship.
Temporarily.
Okay.
Can you read the motion again, please?
Could we have the motion read back to us?
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion is that Council approve the temporary relocation of municipal enforcement in the CRU space.
Thank you.
Okay, and so my question is, again, has to do with the money that is being spent to put municipal enforcement in that space. I'm curious to know if there is any sort of rules about administration's ability to spend money on capital projects without council approval.
Council, I think you're still drifting. You're
about.
drifting far away from the motion on the floor. The motion on the floor, the verbiage deals directly with whether we agree to move the bylaw officers into that space. That's all the motion says. It doesn't talk about who's in charge of funding, how the procedure works as far as capital projects. It just deals with the motion, or with the move of the bylaw officers. That's my ruling. That's my ruling on the floor. I'm ruling that that is the motion on the floor, and all discussion should only deal with whether we're going to move the bylaw officers into that space temporarily. If you want to bring back, could I finish my sentence? If you want to bring back for discussion September 15th, maybe, we could have a full and fulsome discussion on that. We could go in camera as well if we get into questioning things. But the motion on the floor is, do we agree with the concept of moving the bylaw officers into that CRU space? So is there any more discussion on that?
Obviously, I'm sorry, but that's totally
just because you keep talking doesn't mean that it's correct.
There's obviously money associated that needs to be spent in order to put them in there, and so you cannot separate the two. You can't say, like,
I believe you can.
That's like saying that council supports the building of a new town hall, but we're not going to worry about the budget that's being spent. We just care about the concept. Obviously, it's like who.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Again,
hypothetical questions on procedure are not usually addressed during this. And so if we need to discuss this, we've already had questions answered on the budget, how much it costs, where it's come from. If we want to discuss procedure and process, we should go in camera, or we just should discuss it at another time. But hypothetical questions around this are not germane to the debate on the floor, Your Worship. And I'm happy to defer to our new legislative services.
Your Worship, this is my time to speak. Thank you very much.
But if you've gone off topic, Councillor Montgomery, and you're not on the topic of moving the people to the building.
This has to do with the motion. I am wondering where the money is. Like, I'm wondering how much Councillor Sobel is willing to budget to move a municipal enforcement into the room temporarily. That needs to be part of the motion, please.
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
that is not the motion.
Are you saying, Councillor Sobel, that you are not
He's letting his motion stand the way it is. He's not accepting a friendly amendment to add any kind of cost figure to that move motion.
I request the question be asked, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I will close my question by saying this is how a $7.5 million building can be $14 million. Thank you very much.
First of all, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. And second of all, Jason, Councillor Montgomery, you made a lot of comments today about being rushed into decisions. We know that that was a huge disaster in the past. And also, we spent 2 hours just now going through Handybus, and we didn't receive regular monthly written reports on the handy bus, nor did we even know about the bus barn not being legally responsible to the town of Strathmore to have to pay. So I find that quite ironic.
We should have
I'm
had,
going
you're
to
right, we should have
Deputy
had a
Mayor
meeting where
Council.
you guys, we all
Deputy-
discussed this well ahead of time. It should not have come to the point where we were discussing
We
the
never
MOU
got
and
from
details.
January to
Point of
June.
order.
From January to June, we did not receive as a council written reports monthly from you. Deputy Mayor
very much.
Cox.
Your worship, we need the question asked.
Deputy Mayor Cox, your question or comment is strictly on the motion of whether we're moving the bylaw officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm also confused. You're saying that we're making a motion with respect to moving enforcement in there, but you're saying there's no money attached to that. So I'm confused. Do we not have to have approval to spend money in this space? Do you not need our approval for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we need to attach the money to it. The money authorization has already been approved by myself to proceed with that.
Okay.
If you want to deal with reprimanding me, then deal with that separately. We're talking about the relocation of the municipal enforcement of the CRU space. And
Right now, we're just focused on the concept.
and if you want to
of do we
publicly
want them there?
criticize me and chastise me for the expenditure, then do so. I don't think you can do much more than you've already done.
So Councillor Sobel has called the question, so I'm going to call the question, and the question deals with the move of the bylaw officers temporarily to the CRU space. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is carried. Thank you, Mark. 8.2, Development Services Cost Recovery and Bylaw Discussion, and I'm just going to quickly
Your Worship,
grab...
we need to go back into committee.
Oh,
of the whole.
sorry, we need a motion to go back into Committee of the Whole. We have it moved by Deputy Mayor Cox this time. All in favor? And Chuck, not to be rude, but I'm quickly going to grab a little more water. Could we have a motion for a quick recess? Oh, we're still in Committee of the Whole. Look, let me just dash out. Chuck, if you start speaking, I'll be back right away.
Since you haven't voted on, sorry, okay.
Do we need to break? So good morning, Council. I'm here to talk about development services fees. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation, about 8 slides for you
Sorry,
today.
Mayor Fuel.
Deborah.
Sorry to interrupt. We didn't complete the vote on moving back to Committee of the Whole. Could we please complete the vote?
Okay, sorry, all in favor?
You did?
And opposed? I thought we did, but...
Okay. Sorry, I must have missed that.
Okay, Chuck.
Thanks again, everybody. Just a quick presentation from me this morning, talking about development services fees. I've got 8 slides for you this morning. Everything's included in your report too, for those at home. Also included in your report is a comparison of kind of the fees in our region as well. That's an important attachment. So this morning, I'm just going to do a quick cost recovery recap for everybody. Then we're going to kind of move into some fees bylaw discussion. Development Services wants to have a discussion today with Council regarding fees. There are 2 places that we have fees right now. We have the consolidated fees bylaw and we have the safety codes bylaw. Today, we're mostly talking about safety codes bylaw stuff. Likely both bylaws will be needed to be amended if there's support for me to come back at the next meeting, which is what I'm here to talk about today. If you'll remember, in June of this year, a few months back, we had a good discussion with Council about cost recovery and department fees, and talking about what kind of the future of fees in my department of development services. We compared expenses, we compared revenue, we talked about all that stuff and kind of what a good cost recovery goal would be to work towards. Administration was asked, why 2017 and 2018 were kind of told to be good years, and that's kind of, those are years where our recovery was over 60%. We recouped the costs about 60% in 2018, and 2017 about 68%. Why were they good? Included in your report is table 2, and it's essentially the number of transactions in those 2 years that were really good, really high at about 200 transactions each year. And the value of the top 6 transactions that occurred were quite high too. So that's the answer to why 2017 and 2018 were good years. 2019, 2020 were good, but just expenses are down, revenues were a little bit down. We had the economy in 2019 and COVID-19 in 2020 being the biggest factors. Essentially how we left off that discussion in June was Development Services wanted to increase cost recovery over the next 5 years, look at kind of recouping some of our costs a little bit better. So that's how we ended that discussion. In order to increase cost recovery, revenue, fees, all the stuff that we've been talking about for a few months, fees are proposed to increase. We've done kind of an in-depth comparison for adjacent municipalities. We've really done some in-depth kind of work on how much time we're spending on applications. We've worked really hard on our philosophy, which is fees should be justifiable, equitable, comparable, and fees should aim to best recover the cost of providing services. In our research of looking at different municipalities, we find that Strathmore is quite low when it comes to fees. We're kind of the lowest in the region. The main fee that I want to talk about today is the building permit fee is currently about $7.50 per 1,000 construction value. The region, so that group of municipalities varies from $8.50 to $10.45. We're the lowest at $7.50. So what does this mean? I guess for a new house coming to Strathmore with a construction value of $300,000, the permit fee is currently around $2,250. With the new fee increased, it'd be about $2,700 there. So there are also new fees that I'd like to talk about briefly today that kind of we're doing service for right now, but we aren't recovering any fees because we don't have a description for them. So the building permit is the fee that I'd like to talk about today the most, and it covers a lot of services. It's quite labor intensive, the work that we do on building permits. It involves completeness review, code review by the safety codes officer, several inspections, scheduling. You can have up to 5 inspections for a new house, so we have to send a staff member out. Verifications of compliance along the way, helping people who have permits kind of finish off their projects. Final inspection and sign off, auditing, filing, and monitoring. So it's quite a lot of work that we do, and it's all covered by that $9 per or $7.50 per 1,000 fee that we collect at the very beginning. So I briefly mentioned that we're providing some services right now that we aren't really collecting a fee for. These are services that we don't really do too often, but they do come up. Things like reinspection in excess of the normal amount, failure to request inspections, failure to verify stuff. Basically, not your normal permit stuff, but stuff outside of the permit process that we need to do a little bit extra work for. The town is changing the way that we offer building permits and services with a longtime staff member retiring, semi-retiring this year. We have a contractor, Park Enterprises, who's helping us provide part-time support, and the town is kind of fronting that bill when these things come up. So it's important that I think it's important that the fees bylaw is amended, to make sure that we have the ability to collect for this stuff that our agency is rightly doing and charging us for. So our recommendation tonight, or I guess this morning, is just we want to have a discussion with council and I know it's a sensitive time right now with the election being so close, but I personally would like to come back to the regular council meeting next week and bring a draft bylaw for council to see, but I just wanted to make sure and touch base with council that that's okay, and maybe answer any preliminary questions and kind of have a discussion with everybody. The most important attachment in your agenda item is this one with the blue colors. I'll pull it up on the screen quickly here, and that's just the comparison of our fees, namely the building permit and inspection services fees, compared to everybody in the region. And anywhere where you see blue on that represents a fee that's currently higher than Strathmore. So it's every block that we see there. So I think it's important that we get our fees bylaw up to date and we kind of do our due diligence on administration side. And I'd be happy to see you next week if you want to see me too. So with that said, I'll just open it up to council discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Mine will be really easy. Chuck, as far as moving up in the building permit fees, is there a danger that we might lose a competitive edge as far as the communities that are right around us? And I know the builders might feel that, you know, how are they going to compete with a Chestermere? So if you could just touch on that, that'd be great.
Thanks, Mayor Fuel. You know, raising the fee is something that, you know, you raise a valid point of maintaining competitiveness, but there's also that fine balance of you know, recovering fees and being kind of fiscally responsible. And, you know, we haven't updated the fees since 2015 for the building permit. It's been several years that the fee hasn't increased. I think that a slight or modest increase would help us cover costs, help us maintain our ability to continue to provide good service. And we'd still be competitive, in my opinion, in the region at the proposed fee increase of $9. It's, you know, just one of these things, unfortunately, that should happen every couple of years. Fees go up. Things like inflation, all that stuff, everything is constantly moving, and it's, you know, my job as a kind of the shepherd of the department to make sure that we have up-to-date fees and that we're still competitive. And, you know, we really want to make sure that we're not proposing anything too high or too onerous right now. I think the proposed increase is slight and modest, and we won't increase it until January 1st of next year if council wishes. But of course, that's up to council to decide. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just that was my question too. So I really appreciate, Mr. Proctor, that you've brought back exactly what you promised, a justifiable, equitable, and comparable report that really allows us to look at this. So am I correct in assuming that if it's council's wishes that you would bring this back to our next council meeting, and that we would see realistically a slight increase that would bring us on to a comparable average of our regional compatriots, our counterparts, and that you would put in those fees under those first 5 items, and just, you said that those issues under safety codes bylaw where we currently have no fee, are some of them related to non-compliance issues too? Is that kind of a lot where they would come in? Thank you. Your Worship, I'd be very, very appreciative of this coming back next week for decision. Thank you. And really, thank you for your report.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer, then Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say thank you, Chuck, for this report. It just really makes sense. It's timely. I mean, we need to start looking at what we're giving away for free, and we can certainly see that we're not in line with other municipalities. What I always wonder, though, is you know, we're looking at Lakes of Muirfield, and you know, they're just booming right now. Is it intentional that you leave out the county in your numbers in terms of permits and that kind of thing? Like, because that's really who we're competing with. I don't know so much if we're competing with, you know, Okotoks. I don't know, but I understand that those are there for reference. But can you give me a little more information on why you chose to exclude them?
Thanks, Councillor Bauer. It's a really good question. I have not compared Wheatland County. You know, whenever I get the chance to compare Strathmore, I'm always looking for a similar small urban to compare them to, just because they operate similar to us. If it's a request of council, I can come back next week with that comparison to Wheatland County. Just add that extra row or column onto that sheet if that would help you make a decision, or if you'd like that, Councillor Bauer, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you. You know, just for interest's sake, yes, I would like that you to be able to do that. It would help me a little bit, because sometimes people are coming to me and saying, you know, I think the taxes, or I think these, you know, fees in Strathmore are too high. You know, I want a larger lot. You know, like I'd like to kind of know why people are choosing to locate here versus there, and you know, kind of what are the benefits and whatnot, and what are the benefits and challenges for the developers as well. So that would be very helpful. And then secondly, I have no problem implementing this right away. What is an advantage of doing it in January 1st? Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Another good question. You know, I guess typically the way that the town has updated our fees bylaw has been at the end of the year, which is kind of something that we do usually in December. So we just kind of wanted to be in line with that and not jump the gun. Although, you know, maybe we can make a decision earlier in the year, this year, fees taking place on January 1st, fee increase, the thing actually happening is just consistent with the past couple amendments. So that's kind of what we've done. We're in building and development, we've kind of had the 2021 construction season occur already. Most of our fees that we're going to recover and collect this year have come in. There is just a small batch left, and you know, maybe it could be an optics thing or something that we can do to help, you know, people finish this season, and then when they start 2022, they can start it fresh, knowing well ahead that what the fees are going to be for the development. So that's staff recommendation. Of course, it's up to council if you want the bylaw to you know, come into effect immediately. Thank you.
Thank you for that justification. I certainly agree, you know, with the rising costs of materials and everything else, that it probably would be best to wait. Thank you very much, Chuck.
Deputy Mayor Cox, followed by Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much, Chuck. I went through this and I am 100% on board for you bringing this back to us next week. I just maybe don't want to see quite as big of an increase. I see that we're going, Chestermere's 993 and we're going to 9. I'd almost rather keep it a little bit less, because if we are going to go with comparables, they would be the people that are going to take it from us, because, oh, I can spend the extra 93 cents. I'm closer to Calgary. I want to give it just that tiny bit more of an edge that, hey, it's, you know, we're talking $1,000 here, you know, that's worthy of change. So I'm very, very for it. I just maybe think I want to see it just a little bit lower than Chestermere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chuck, for this, for your analysis on this. One of the things that I read in there was that you guys had, you know, kind of done some assessment of ways to kind of be more efficient. And I was just wondering what the results of your assessment were. Like, what were some of the things that you learned, you know, in ways to be more efficient, let's say?
Just maybe a question back for Councillor Montgomery. Is that kind of more efficient for processes, more efficient for fees? What kind of thing were you looking for clarity on? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just looking for where it says that in the report. I made a note about it. Oh, so it says, it said you had, you know, kind of reviewed internal processes, you know, and cost recovery data, financial data, and, you know, other things. And I was just wondering, like, during that kind of internal review, if you guys, like, you know, what kind of things you guys noticed, you know, were ways to improve. And I was just wondering what the results of those were.
Thanks, Councillor Montgomery. You know, it is a really good question. And, you know, it's maybe something that there's a really long answer to. I won't go into the huge answer right now, but, you know, I guess I started in the town in 2014, and kind of the last 5 years especially, we've been reviewing processes and really working hard as a department to get better, modernize the planning department. And I think a lot of improvements have specifically made in that kind of thing. Transparency, treating everybody the same. You know, we follow now a process called the DTR process, which is the detailed team review process, which kind of didn't happen the best in the past. We've really improved that with Ethan's group, with Donna's group. We've kind of really worked hard as a department to, you know, work together. A few years back, planning and engineering were separate. They've since been combined, and the division of operations, engineering, planning has all been combined. There's a lot of stuff like that that's contributing to internal, you know, processes being improved, and that kind of thing. That there's more to say about that kind of stuff if you'd like me to get into it. But generally, you know, we've been kind of working hard as an internal department to work well together with the other departments. We've been kind of modernizing processes. updating our development permit packages and our application packages on our website, doing a lot of work on our website. It's a lot of stuff that we've been working on. We're a different department than we were 5 years ago. I'm personally really proud of where we are. It's been a team effort and a council effort to get us here where we're at right now. And I think that we wanted to get some of those improvements done before we came back to council to increase fees to make sure that we can continue offering a great service to the residents and to the developers. And I think we're at that point now where we are modernized and we've really come a long way in the past 5 years. I hope that helps, Councillor Montgomery. I'd be happy to have further discussion or come back or whatever, because there's been really a lot of work done, and I'm just really happy over the past 5 years. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. Yeah, I'm aware of some of the stuff that's gone on, and I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of kind of toot your horn and then kind of give some accolades to the people you work with. And what, I can just say myself, I've seen a lot of improvements and changes and positive changes. And I've been impressed during my time on council with the things that you guys have come up with. And so I just wanted to, give you a chance to highlight those. Another question I had, and this just has to do with the table where you kind of discuss like subsidization of various activities. And I just wanted to clarify. So a couple of those are more like more like a fine almost, aren't they, rather than like a fee? And so we're not exactly like kind of, I guess, in a couple we might be subsidizing, but it's a good way to kind of, keep people, from, straying outside of the rules, let's say.
Thanks, Councillor Montgomery. Another good point. We don't want any subsidies on the stuff that may be considered a fine or a fee or something outside of regular service. We don't want to provide any subsidy for that. Ideally, that's full recovery, outside of the normal permit process. We recover 100% of those costs for the fine or for the extra work that we have to do. And currently, there is 100% of a subsidy. We're missing the fee. And that's why, I'd like to highlight that with council and come back next week to address that. Regarding the building permit subsidy, our existing subsidy, we think is in the realm of, 35, 40%. There probably is always going to be a subsidy for building permit processes. We'll break even on most, hopefully, but we're the only business in town that offers building permits, and I think there always is going to be a little bit of subsidy, and that's probably normal for all planning departments within our region. Those estimates were just provided to give council kind of an idea of what where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you. And my final question just has to do with the fee that's charged like per $1,000, let's say. So when somebody is, and I guess, so here's kind of I was kind of thinking about, like how accurate of, kind of, numbers you're given and how accurately those reflect the amount of work that goes into inspecting some places. And I'll give you an example. Like if somebody's finishing their basement, for instance, and they could put $100,000 worth of flooring in and then, put one plug, in which case, they have to get a permit and, get it inspected. The value of what's being inspected isn't, $100,000. And so I was just kind of thinking, like, was there any thought about, having a fee that reflected, just the things that needed to be inspected rather than the total cost of the renovation? Because, when somebody comes in to, get a building permit, I'm just wondering about, if it's necessarily accurate to include things of value that aren't, necessarily part of, what would be inspectable, let's say, for a building permit.
Thanks, Councillor Montgomery. Not included in this report, we have kind of a cheat sheet in our department that kind of breaks down, it lists basement development and gives a cost per square foot. It breaks down some of the stuff that homeowners and renovators and developers, builders can do. And, sometimes we do double check square footage to make sure those fees are on side with the estimate that we're given. We try to work with folks too, Councillor Montgomery, to make sure that we're not doing anything extra outside of the permit process, that kind of stuff. As far as an additional fee, we can investigate that and bring that back for next week if you'd like. We'd also like to come back to the new council in December with some more fees too. So this won't be the last chance for fee bylaw amendments for us this year. Thank you.
Yeah, like, yeah, I guess like to the point I was kind of making, you wouldn't, yeah, you'd have like, you know, like almost like, it's like, okay, you're going to do like, let's say install four plugs or something like that. So therefore, you know, it's say, you know, 30 or 40 or 50 bucks per plug, you know, the cost to come in, and that's the fee for that, you know, versus, so I was just kind of trying to think about, you know, like more accurate ways to assess the actual, because otherwise, like I said, you could have one person who does $100,000 worth of flooring and then installs one plug, and they're subsidizing the person that's, you know, installing a basement full of electrical and nothing else essentially, you know, depending on the value. So thank you very much for the information, and thanks a lot for the report. And yeah, I'm happy to have it come back next week. Thank you.
Councillor Sobel, then Councillor Peterson.
Very quickly, thank you for the report, Chuck. And yes, I'd love to have this come back. The only question I have is, and this is further to Councillor Cox's concern about Chestermere and our rates with Chestermere. I would assume that you wouldn't not have information at your fingertips that would deal with what, if any, raise Chestermere is considering in this area, would you?
Well, thanks, Councillor Sobel. I don't at the moment, but I was also thinking the same thing you potentially. Chestermere might be increasing fees January 1st of this year. We don't know. Yeah. I'll check before I come back next week, though. Thank you.
I suspect so. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just two things. The first is that I really agree with what Councillor Sobel and Councillor Cox said. And the second thing that I've become more and more mindful of with the reports that you've brought to this council over the time that I've been here is that council, without the comprehensive knowledge that people in planning and development like yourself carry, we wind up very often, incidentally, piecemealing pieces of legislation or consideration into our processes that don't reflect broadly on the comprehensive process that you have to undertake each time. And so sometimes I think that when we deal with it in the instant and we don't deal with it in that bigger picture. And I'm wondering if in the future, if you ever thought about, I'm sure you have, but a cost recovery framework that would give that certainty to builders and developers and contractors, and would also be a really good guide for people who are uninitiated in that comprehensive process. And I know that might be something in the future, and I see you doing it all the time. But just wondering if we would formalize that at some point. And again, I really appreciate what you teach us all the time.
Thanks, Councillor Peterson. Again, another great question. You know, I was happy that council initially asked my department to talk about cost recoveries and to be a part of the first time that cost recoveries occurred in this organization in the town of Strathmore. You know, we were happy to have that first conversation, and that the first time that ever happened was in June, I think. Not that implies any, you know, it just implies an evolving organization, people, you know, talking about money and taking kind of fees, you know, seriously in my group. And I'm just happy that it started, and I'm happy to continue that conversation. And I think, you know, we had a really good discussion with council in June saying, you know, we set a 5-year goal of this cost recovery, and I intend to come back to council and kind of say if we're on track and make it easy for the new group too, if, you know, if there's a change on council, you know, make sure that they have the same time opportunity with cost recovery stuff. Because I think it's interesting, and I like you said, Councillor Peterson, it's important for council to know that stuff too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for the presentation, and we look forward to having it come back to us. That brings us to 8.3, the draft financial report to June 30th, 2021.
Your Worship, would I be able to make a motion to come out of camera and then just have a quick 3-minute recess, please?
Sure.
Point of privilege?
We could do a point of privilege, and you can just...
And do we have to come out of camera to do the point of privilege?
Kara, we can just do a point of privilege and have her step out.
So you shouldn't be passing any motions when you're in committee of the whole, so you should come out and then you can go for a recess.
Okay.
Motion to come out of camera,
Okay,
please.
we have a, thank you. We have a motion to come out of in camera. All in favor?
Yeah, it's committee of the whole.
Come out of committee of the whole.
Point of privilege. Can we have a, can I just go, or is it for everyone? I'd like to make a motion for a quick recess.
Okay, you've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you.
Like you needed to wait more. I'm sorry. Do you have your fog handy, Pat? Would you mind lending it to me, please? I just have to get through that door to use the bathroom.
Okay. Welcome back to the Committee of the Whole meeting. Do we have we need a motion to come back into Committee of the Whole? Yeah. So I'm looking for a motion to go back into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Pearson?
I would so move that we come back into Committee of the Whole, Your Worship.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And we're back in Committee of the Whole. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Your Worship, Council, I'm here to report the draft quarterly financials. So we'll start with the first page, which is Consolidated Statement of Financial Position. The total of cash, temporary investments, and investments at June 30th, 2021 totaled $20.6 million. Our cash balance, not including investments, at September 7th is $10.7 million. Taxes and grants in place of taxes receivable is significantly higher than December 2020. At June 30th, 2021, taxes receivable was $3.5 million compared to $600,000 at December 31st, 2020. This is due to timing. I looked at our August balance at the end of August 2021 and compared it to August 2019, and we have actually collected $200,000 more than we had in 2019, which was a non-COVID year. I looked at our tip collections for 2020, and they're holding up really well as well. So it's actually really good news. We're doing a great job on collection of taxes. The next account I'd like you to look at is the trade and other accounts receivable. This is $3.2 million, and it's up $1 million from the balance of $2.1 million at December 31st, 2020. This is due to our MSI receivable. We received our capital MSI payments of $3.5 million in July 2021, so the MSI will come off out of receivables. Investments are down $4.3 million from December 31st, 2020. Investments have decreased to pay for both operating and capital expenditures during Q1 and Q2. Our investment balance at August 30th is $13.4 million, and as I said before, at September 7th, our cash is $10.7 million, so our cash is good. Our total financial assets of $27.2 million compared to $19.8 million, so our assets have gone up. Our liability section, our total liabilities are $36.1 million compared to $31.6 million at December 30th, 2020. The accounts payable in total have decreased by $2.7 million from $4.4 million at December 31st to $1.8 million at June 30th. This in part is due to the 2020 capital projects. It is a $1.5 million decrease. Deferred revenue increased by $7.6 million. This is due to deferred taxes of $6.4 million. We collect for taxes for the year at June 30th, so many people prepay, so it's sitting in that deferred revenue balance. And we also have our MSP grant of $1.6 million, and this is to pay for Ethan's ramp program and for the family center roof. The long-term debt decreased from $24.4 million at December 31st to $23.9 million, representing $1.6 million in payments made on the debt during the first 2 quarters and proceeds from additional debt of $1.2 million. Our net financial assets, that is the total of financial assets, less the total of the liabilities, improved by $2.9 million to $8.8 million from $11.7 million at December 31st, 2020. Does anyone have any questions?
Just on the 1.6 million on the MSP, you said it was the roof of the arena. What was the other one?
The ramp program, so it's redoing the roads. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, Ethan can talk more about it, but it was Thistle Way and George Freeman Trail. Yeah. So moving on to the consolidated statement of operations. The operating revenue of $15.8 million is 50% of the total budgeted revenue of the year. User fees and sale of goods is slightly up when compared to the previous year. Franchise fees and utility charges more than offset the decrease in rental and sales of goods and services from recreation and culture. Government transfers for operating include $182,000 of the MOST grant. We have now brought 100% of the $1.4 million MOST grant into income. No more is expected. $640,000 of MSI has also been recorded to cover the town hall and the commons principal loan payments. Penalties on taxes is consistent when compared to June 30th, 2020. I just want to mention that our COVID relief was discontinued in 2021. 2020 penalties were at 4% compared to 2022 penalties are now currently at 9%. Licenses and permits is at 52,000 compared to the previous year. This is mainly due to the increase in business taxes. During 2020, business licenses for in-town businesses were waived. Move on to expenses. So total expenses to June 30th are 15.5 million and at 45% of budget. Expenses are down 836,000 compared to June 30th, 2020. This is due to a decrease in spending due to temporary layoffs with the closure of our recreation facilities in Q1. Turnover has also contributed to a reduction in salaries and wages in various departments. We'll move on to the schedule of segmented reporting. This schedule shows revenue and expenses by operational area. Does anyone have any questions? Schedule. Schedule of property taxes. This schedule is based on 50% of the budgeted taxation and reflects the actual requisitions and payments made during the first half of 2021. So we move on to the review of salaries, wages, and benefits. Total salaries, wages, and benefits paid to June 30th was 5.1 million and represents 40% of the total budget of 12.6 million. In addition to that, the town has paid 462,000 towards operating consultants. The schedule of utilities reporting. The town's goal to achieve full costing of utilities is being met. We have a surplus of 544,000 at June 30th, 2021. Move on to the reserve continuity statement. This statement shows the reserves at June 30th, 2021. Total reserves increased from 9.4 million at December 30th, 2020 to 9.8 million at June 30th, 2021. The schedule of accumulated surplus. So it's important to make sure that the town's accumulated surplus, net of equity, is above zero. At June 30th, 2021, we have a surplus of 1.9 million. And the next schedules we provided was the capital spend. At June 30th, 2021, we had spent 834,000 on our capital projects. We've also provided the funding of the projects. Now, please realize that most of our capital projects are done during Q3 and Q4. So that's why so little has been spent, because it's as at June 30th. Does anyone have any questions on the information we've provided?
Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question about process, and it's just because we've gone through the budget process for 3 years, and every time we look at property taxes, we always separate it into commercial and residential. But when we receive these, it's kind of lumped together. And so I'm just wondering, is there any benefit to separating it at all?
We can do that for you if you like. So you have yeah, we can do that. That's
so are there people that default on commercial as well as residential property taxes?
It would be on both.
Because we kind of focus on residential all the time and giving relief for people for residential. We didn't really talk about commercial, and so I was just wondering how it compares.
There's been very, very little default on commercial properties. I have not signed a tax agreement for commercial property that I can remember now for a long, long time. Not that our commercial is doing well, but our residential struggles a lot more proportionately compared to the commercial.
Thank you.
Okay, no, we can adjust the schedule to show it as residential and commercial to make it simpler as well. Any other questions?
Councillor Montgomery?
If I might. Thanks a lot for the report, Lisa. So a question I have just has to do with the policy that we enacted earlier this year with regards to, let's say, control or oversight of capital spending. And the policy, I believe, essentially said that if there was any scope change, that that administration would come back to council for reapproval or approval of how the money would be spent. Now, if a project is canceled, that seems to me like that would be a scope change, and therefore, if the money is being redirected somewhere else, is that considered a scope change? And should administration be coming to council to spend or reallocate the money if the scope has changed for a project that was pre-approved?
Well, I'll let Mel speak to that. He wrote the policy, so.
Within that policy, there's a certain amount at the, there's a certain threshold that would require administration to bring back a change. If it's under that, the CAO and the director can implement a change, provided that it's within the dollar amount and within the general scope of the overall capital budget, as long as there was no additional total spend.
If administration, if you don't mind, if you could pull that policy up. I understand that that was the way it was written, but, and I thank Councillor Sobel for this, because himself and me, we were quite adamant that if there was, the way that the policy must be written and read is that if there's any scope changes, regardless of the dollar figure, if there was any material changes to the project, then it would have to come back for reapproval, regardless of the dollar figure. And so if you could confirm that for me, that'd be great. Because, and even to your point, Mel, I noticed, for instance, there's projects, being canceled that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars with that money being redirected. And the threshold that was in there, I believe initially it was $200,000, I think is what it said. The administration had $200,000 leeway. But I believe that we did get that changed so that if there is any sort of change in what was being delivered, that would have to come back for reapproval. So I'm just wondering, if administration can perhaps look at the policy and confirm that, or tell me I'm wrong, because that does kind of influence, I guess, some of what I'm seeing here in these documents as far as money being redirected from canceled projects. And I guess, I don't need that answer today, but if administration could perhaps bring that back next week, unless you want to answer it today, but I believe that the policy says that if there's any changes at all, that it must be reapproved by council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the policy doesn't state that if there's any changes at all, it has to come back to council. There is parameters in there that allows administration to deal with it. And you can't have a policy where everything has to come back to council if there's any variance. A good example is West Ridge Road. You hit contaminated soil, you can't shut that project down and leave open trenches, etc., until council approves dealing with that. That's why you have contingencies within budget, and that's why you can have scope change. You could have a project that goes over, just say $10,000, one project, but you have another project that's $25,000 under, so you can offset one against the other. And the way the policy is written, there are those parameters contained in that. That's how it works in every municipality across Canada, across North America. But we'll bring that policy back and council can review it, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it said if there was any material change at all or change in scope, that it had to be brought back. But yeah, so if you could bring that back, and if you want, I could do an admin inquiry right now, asking you to bring the policy back to answer that question. That'd be great. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't need an admin inquiry. We'll bring the policy back, just for information.
Thank you, Mr. Legore. Carry on, Lisa.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That takes us to Infrastructure Capital Projects Update 8.4. Welcome, Ethan.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I'm here today to give a brief update on the Infrastructure Department and the projects we are managing here in 2021. My team has taken on 21 capital projects in 2021, and we're responsible for an additional 8 projects which have been contracted to EPCOR. In a total, our budget is approximately $5.1 million, and I'm happy to say that currently we are under our overall budget. To highlight a couple of our major projects, Westridge Road has an approved budget of $2.42 million, and currently we have approximately $65,000 uncommitted. This project included deep utilities, roadway realignment to include a parking lane for heavy vehicles, telecom and shallow utility realignment, and preparation for our 2022 scope, which will be the sidewalks and the beautification. This project did expend significant costs due to unforeseen circumstances, primarily contamination. And we are regularly in contact with Alberta Environment to ensure that those items are cleaned up properly. That did eat up a significant portion of our contingency on this project. The other major project that I'd like to highlight is our Strathmore Lakes Pond outfall upgrade. This project has a budget of about $645,000 and currently has a healthy contingency of about $100,000. The project just recently started construction and some unknowns still remain until all the existing pipe is removed. The project will also see the normal lake level dropped by about 100 mils or 4 inches. This will provide an additional buffer during storm events to reduce the likelihood of the water breaking the banks. In terms of our EPCOR capital projects, through our contract with EPCOR, they are to manage approximately $1 million in upgrades to the system. This year, an assessment of Brentwood Reservoir was completed, and although it is nearing the end of its lifespan, repairs required were determined to be minimal. With the budget not being spent and the knowing that Brentwood will eventually have to be replaced, we've used those funds to determine what needs to happen at Wildflower to allow for Brentwood Reservoir to be decommissioned. At this time, the reservoir is still good for use for a multitude of years, but we do want to get ahead of the game and not be put in a position where somebody tells us that reservoir is no longer safe to use. Although we are under budget overall, we do have a couple of projects which are currently shown as exceeding their budget. The SMB solar project is on budget, but I'm showing it seasons just simply because we haven't received our grant funding yet. We do expect that here about the next month or so, and definitely before the end of the year. The other 3 projects have small exceedances, which were all deemed to add additional value to the projects. For example, the pathway development, it was a irrigation system that extended into public property. It was best for everybody that get repaired before we put the pathway in. Small items such as that. Overall, we are currently sitting in a good position with contingencies remaining as near the end of construction season. EPCOR projects still have some costs to go. Specifically, they have a couple of projects which have well over $100,000 left to spend. So the $498,000 remaining under EPCOR is, as of today, I don't expect it to be that high at the end of the year. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions?
Your Worship, I'm just really impressed that you're 21 and 21 and you're coming under budget,
and allocating appropriately. And you've done this in this ever-changing, challenging world of COVID. And I know that your due diligence has been, through the whole administration here, has been super. And the fact that you've been able to continue to do this is a credit to you and to our community. I really thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Heath, and I just want to say, attaboy. I want to give you and your team congratulations. This is a real significant six-figure dollar amount, and I am just so grateful. I know that it's not easy to do, especially in this climate, in this day and age, and with costs rising and everything. And I think it's a real testament to your team, and we just value you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Ethan, just a quick question on Westridge. Are we still looking at September 15th for paving to be done, or are we a little behind still?
Your Worship, we are looking to be a couple of days behind that, September 15th. We had our last construction meeting yesterday, and they're forecasting about 2 weeks for completion, so that would put us around the 20th.
And I'm not sure if you heard, but I had a little conversation with the GM at Strathmore Motor Products, very complimentary to you and your staff, as well as the contractors on the road. Whenever Clarence has had some concern or question, they've been very receptive, very responsible. So he wanted to share that with you and your staff. So thank you for this.
Your Worship, if I could just add to that, also in addition to Strathmore Motor Products, the Imperial Dragon said that the same thing, that they've just been so well served by your people, and that the signage has actually improved access, and they expressed exactly the same thing. So really good work.
Thank you, and thank you for your report. We have no urgent business. Administrative inquiries. 10.1, administrative inquiry response for the town use of herbicides. Or is it herbicides? Herbicides? Herb is a guy that might have worked for us at one time. Yeah, whatever. Donna, just turn your mic on.
Sorry, thank you. As you mentioned, I'm here to discuss an inquiry that came with regards to the stance on the town's use of herbicides in general by the park staff and what the current strategy is to deal with dandelions, and also to provide a background of the sources of information that these policies are derived from. So the town of Strathmore, we rely on the parks classification policy with regards to herbicide use in the parks and green spaces. We are also mandated by the Alberta government in the Weed Act and Regulation, which has 73 legislated weeds that must be controlled or destroyed. Depending on the designation of the weed, we use mechanical and manual control, and we use chemicals as a last resort to control those weeds or destroy them. When it comes to dandelions, these are not one of the 73 legislated weeds the Alberta government requires to be controlled or destroyed. It is the one weed, though, that we do receive the most complaints about. So for the most part, our mechanical controls have worked, but sometimes they don't. And the infestation can, in the eyes of some, get out of control. Our current strategy is to balance the community expectations as well as the environmental impact that chemicals have on the environment. We're basing our use of chemicals on the dandelion on a threshold of infestation. This year, we use chemical control on 5 locations, the 2 sports fields, 2 parks, and 1 green space. All of these locations, with the exception of the sports fields, were beyond the 75% infestation. We did this early in the season, and as of today, we technically only received 2 complaints with regards to dandelions. So I think the strategy did work. Another thing we've also done is we brought some additional spraying of weeds in-house. One of the suppliers had told us about a vinegar-based product that was really effective. It's environmentally friendly. So we've been testing it out in the cracks of the sidewalks and the pathways and had great success. As you know, we also have the Aquacide machine. What we're finding with the vinegar-based product is that we're getting an immediate kill and we don't have to return back to the location Whereas with the Aquaside machine, we do have to return multiple times to control the weed. And that's our current strategy. Any questions?
Any questions from councillors? Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this response, Donna. I received this as a question from a member of the community. I have forwarded this response to them. I haven't received a response back, and I'll let you know if there's any kind of follow-up questions, but I do appreciate your time on this. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, and thank you, Donna. You know, this is, as you probably well know, this is a topic, especially in regards to dandelions, that hits social media, and I'm hoping that your response might be able to find its way onto the town Facebook page and perhaps even our webpage. I think it's something that people should know, and it explains the town's direction in this regard. So thank you again for that.
Okay, I will work with communications on that.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your response to this, Donna. It's always a hot topic in Strathmore, and how many dandelions we have, and how are we protecting the bees. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you drive into Calgary right now, they have big signs that say, you know,
boulevards.
Yes, yeah, bee boulevard, and they've planted those yellow flowers. And I think what they're trying to do is use those yellow flowers to choke out the dandelions, and it looks to be successful. Would Strathmore be able to kind of find out a little bit about how they did that, and perhaps have a pilot area, maybe Thomas Drive or something, where we can try and do that with the signage and, you know, just test area or something like that? Is that something that we could perhaps do in the future?
Absolutely, yeah. That's actually something we've already been talking about in operations, is having a bee boulevard somewhere and doing a test project with that.
I would love it to be visual, so lots of people would see it, and I'm behind you 100%.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. I had mentioned a similar thing to Craig when he worked with us, and Lady Bird Johnson, the wife of President Johnson in Texas, spearheaded a project where they were trying to cut the costs of cutting grass in all the ditches along the highways and things, and she suggested an idea that took off. They planted perennial flowers in areas that they used to cut, and it really changed the landscape quite a bit. So thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
And at this time, we're looking for a motion to come up.
Your Worship, I had submitted some
okay.
administrative inquiries to Ms. Rusk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have 5 administrative inquiries from Councillor Bauer. The first administrative inquiry is the Strathmore Lakes erosion. Can administration please provide council with the following? When was Strathmore Lake handed over to the town? Who in the town signed off on the transfer of the lake? Who approved the engineering of the lake shoreline? Was there an engineering firm who provided the town drawings and certification of the shoreline stability? Is there any legal recourse for the town to recover costs from the developer, engineering firm, or another third party? Second inquiry is about the Town of Strathmore employee severance packages. Could administration please provide council the amount of severance paid to all employees, including progressive discipline severance packages during the period from October 30th, 2017 to September 1st, 2021. In the interest of transparency, could the response to this inquiry be posted on the website? Third inquiry is money paid to Town of Strathmore consultants. Can administration please provide a yearly report dated back to 2016 to 2020 of the amount paid each year to consultants and/or contractors for their expertise offered to the Town of Strathmore? In the interest of transparency, could this reply be posted on the website? The fourth inquiry is council investigation on Councillor Peterson. Could administration please provide a full report of the total amounts spent on the investigation into the conduct of Councillor Peterson, including staff time, lawyers' fees, and any additional money spent in the pursuit of the investigation? In the interest of transparency, could that amount please be published on the website? The fifth inquiry is Town Hall Municipal Building Local Contractors. Could administration please provide a complete list of the local companies from Strathmore or Wheatland County who worked or contributed in any way on the building of the current municipal town hall, including signage, road crews, geotechnical, and security? Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to come out of Committee of the Whole.
I would so move to come out of Committee of the Whole, Your Worship.
You all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried, and we need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Bauer. We have a motion to go in camera at 1:01. All in favor? And we're now in camera.